no, it's not. We're not. It says we're in practice session.
Joe, it says we're in practice session. Should I hit start webinar? Okay. I'll just give it a minute, see if people join us. I see the numbers climbing a little bit. All right, it is 7:03 on Wednesday, August 25th. This is the Swampscott School Committee. We are in regular session. The school committee, and this has gotten a little bit smaller for me. The school committee and the superintendent are in person, along with some members of the superintendent's team and I think a few people here from the public. The public is going to be able to attend virtually, and this is an act relative to extending the COVID-19 measures as of April 1st, 2022, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and we'll begin with Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we don't have nearly as many attendees as we did the last time. However, I'd like to take a moment to read this. As you may be aware, Tuesday, the Massachusetts Department of Elementary Education, DESE, announced a masking mandate in all schools across the Commonwealth until October 1st. This time is being used to boost vaccination rates, and I have a DESE press release that I'm happy to share. The school committee and the administration recognize that this is a polarizing issue, and we have been watching as district after district becomes embroiled in violence on the issue. Gratefully, our public forum was blessed with civility during the discussion of such a divisive topic. The letters that we have received reflect similar courtesy, and we want to thank our community deeply for that. We believe that this forum was a sign of how our community operates, a community that will continue to work together, to listen, and to continue to be respectful. We ask for your grace and patience from everybody as we head into a new school year that does not yet reflect what we are all in need of, which is a return to a new normal. Perhaps we can choose to take the DESE mandate as an opportunity to continue to look out for each other, particularly our most vulnerable students. We acknowledge those among us who see this as an infringement of their rights, and we acknowledge those among us who see this as a responsibility. It has been a strenuous 18 months for every single one of us. We look forward to welcoming our students and their teachers back to school, and we remain committed to making the best of an untenable situation, ensuring that Swampscott District students continue to learn and thrive. I was really pleased by the feedback that we got last week and the attendance, and obviously any decisions that we needed to make are not going to be discussed tonight because DESE has made that moot. So I'm going to go to committee announcements. Mr. Giantis, if you want to start.
Amy, I would say just given the full agenda.
Okay, sorry, give me 1 second.
Yep.
I do not see his name. Okay, sorry about that.
No worries. Nothing specific, and just in the interest of the full agenda, I do want to say, though, that I've heard from lots of parents and kids that they are actually looking forward to getting back in, excited about it, looking forward to it. So, I'm very optimistic even though there's a few hiccups here, very optimistic for the year.
Marshall? Nothing?
I'm excited for back to school. It's so weird not to have a kid that's going back to school, but I've been talking to my niece and my nephew, and I'm really excited to hear Mr. Kohat's presentation tonight, because I've been hearing a lot about their schedules. So that's going to be exciting to hear the change. Looking forward to that.
Really same with me too. It is strange not having any kids, although I, for me, just finished 2 college drop-offs, so that's nice. I do have nephews and nieces. I'm also looking forward to hearing what the new high school is doing for scheduling. That's it.
Terrific, and with that, I'll turn that over to you, Superintendent.
Thank you. There are a lot of reports under my superintendent's report, a lot of happy news, a lot of great updates, and I'd like to start with a little bit of background about our school resource officer. We've had a school resource officer in our district for as long as I remember, and over the years that position morphed and the program changed due to the position of the SRO being in joint positions with the police department and the school department. We got away from the original intent of what the SRO was. It's supposed to be a mentoring and role model program connecting with students, and the position opened up this year, and I'm really excited that we had an opportunity to interview 5 very qualified candidates from the police department. I'm grateful that they showed interest in this position. Mr. Kohat, Mrs. Finn, Mr. Kalishman, and Ms. Lamborn and Ms. Ogunbona all were participated in the first round of interviews last week with the 5 candidates. They were all so very strong that we went to a second round this week. And I should also add that on the police department side, Lieutenant Lord participated in round 1, and then in the second round, Lieutenant Lord and myself participated and did the second round of interviews. And this evening, I am thrilled to announce that Officer Brian Wilson has accepted the position of the School Resource Officer for the Swampscott Public Schools. I would like to shout out a huge thank you to Interim Chief David Kurtz, Captain Cable, and Lieutenant Lord for their partnership and support in this process. They really have been incredibly supportive, made me primary in this process, which is huge because of the importance of this role. And tonight we have via Zoom Officer Wilson, and I'm going to turn it over to him if he'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, Superintendent Angelakis, and thank you for this opportunity, you and everybody on the board and the town. Growing up in Swampscott, I just feel like it's a great opportunity to come kind of back full circle. I've been a police officer for over 20 years in the town, and I've had a lot of interactions with a lot of you in the schools as well as students and the juveniles, and I really feel like we can take the program into a very positive and great way in the future, the way we all see it going. And just really getting back to the basics of just being there for the children and helping them with their needs.
We're really excited. Officer Wilson came in with some incredible ideas, and he doesn't begin officially till Monday, but we are meeting Friday to review those ideas and lay out the first few weeks of his new position. So his office will be located here at the high school. He will be at each of the schools at least once a week. And so we're really excited and committed to getting into those elementary schools to start those relationships at such a young age. It's critical to when they come up to middle school and high school and start making some different decisions that they already have a relationship with the school resource officer. So I couldn't be more thrilled that he's on board, that he officially starts Monday. He joined our leadership team for part of the day today. He's making an appearance tonight. He will be at the convocation Monday afternoon. So he's already got a very tight schedule. So welcome aboard.
Can I ask some questions? So will Officer will he be in the school full-time?
Yes.
And will he be in his office or around, as much as any administrator would be?
The police department understood the dilemma we had, and he is dedicated to the schools full-time.
Wow.
His office, he doesn't have an office at the police station. His office is in the schools, and we are really going to work hard to bring this back to making that connection between the police and the students, and not a fearful thing when you see, or even we were talking about the teachers see a cruiser pull up to the school or a police officer in uniform and suddenly, what's going on? It should not be that way. And so we're going to work together really hard to change that culture, and I can't wait to see how the kids are going to benefit from this position.
My next question is around uniform and a weapon.
So uniform, just as in previous, our MOU, our operations protocol says a soft uniform. There, I am not going to have Officer Wilson in full-blown body armor. A polo shirt and khakis that say police is important to me, because I think in order to have the students make the connection, it can't be plain clothes. And our operating procedure talks about that. I didn't think about the weapon, but I'll throw that to Officer Wilson. I don't know.
I believe as far as policy goes for a safety issue with the schools, I do have to be armed. It won't be a full gun belt, obviously. It won't be the taser and all that stuff. It'll just be a firearm and my radio is what the plan is.
And that's standard. But I do think, in previous years, we had plain clothes, and that doesn't do anything. I don't believe it does what it's supposed to do in building relationships between the police department and the school department. So, so super excited. Any other questions?
Just a really happy memory just came bouncing in. I remember way back, and you were a teacher at the time, and we're lucky enough that we had won a raffle, and I remember Officer Cheever rolling up to my house. The twins are in kindergarten. My oldest was in fifth grade, and it was a very different program that I think it has morphed into. So it's great to hear that Officer Wilson and the leadership team recognize that, and the Swampscott Police Department too, because that really, believe it or not, made an impact even to this day. That the kids will say, and there's a picture in at least one of the dorms, at one of their rooms. I don't remember which one brought it. I don't remember, but it's of again, Officer Cheever in front of the house, and it's a really good thing. So I wish you the best of luck, Officer Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's great. I'm just wondering if maybe we can bring Officer Wilson back in a couple of months to find out, how it's going, and if his new ideas, how they're working out.
Absolutely. And this is on me that he's via Zoom, because I made a decision very quickly, and his family life is more important than being here in person right now. So I own that, and we've joked about that. But absolutely, I think he'll participate in coming back to school committee reporting. We've talked a lot about attending high school plays, middle school plays, chorus concerts, band concerts. It's not just the 7:30 to 3:30, and we've talked about flexing the schedule in order that all kids see him, not just at a football game, but at the chess club and all of those things. So super excited, getting back to where this program originated and creating those memories for kids that are so important, and the connections.
I confess, I'm not happy about the idea that there'll be a gun in our school. I understand it, but I would hope that there'll be education around that.
It's an opportunity.
Yeah, I hope.
It's an educational opportunity, and what you have to remember is this position has existed for years, and if I'm not mistaken, there was a firearm.
And Frank, there may very well have been one last year, but it just wasn't something that I had thought about because the topic of the SRO hadn't come up.
Correct.
So I couldn't not say that. So.
Anyone else?
I just want to say this is great news, and I'm particularly glad to hear that it's full-time dedicated position. I think there's a great opportunity here as well, between the officer and the students, so fully supportive.
This made my week, I have to say. And I do have to reiterate how supportive the police department has been in letting me take the lead, but also recognizing the need for a full-time school resource officer. And that's going to make all the difference. So good news.
Yay.
Thank you, Officer Wilson.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
The next great news I have, and he is on vacation in California, and so he attended the leadership team meeting today, is that the district has appointed Mr. Craig Harris as the Director of Social Emotional Learning, and he is beginning in that position a little bit of history for those that don't know Mr. Harris. He began in our district in 2015, and he was hired as a school psychologist for both the middle school and the high schools. I worked very closely with Craig, having just become superintendent, and making psychological safety and social emotional well-being the #1 priority of the district strategy. As a result, I created a mental health task force in the district that was in existence from 2015 to 2019, and I had selected Craig to be one of our tri-chairs of that committee due to his experience and skills in leading the work for the district's goal of psychological safety. From that, in 2016 until now, Craig has been assigned to the high school, and one of the programs, or two of the programs, he was hugely instrumental in helping to create, build, launch, and lead are the Swift and Harbor programs, the transition programs we have. And unfortunately, those programs have been growing exponentially, and our need for a director to manage the social worker we're hiring to go into homes this year it's the next step, and it's the next level. Mr. Harris has already outlined his short and long-term goals, which include a lot of data collection, and not just about students' well-being, but about staff's well-being, because we recognize that everybody's coming back after 18 months of turmoil. And I have said it in an email to my entire district that I'm not sure a short summer is helping us recover to where we need to be. It is starting this last week, is amping up, and meeting the new teachers today, 20-plus teachers, and seeing their enthusiasm was a real shot in the arm. But it's challenging. So I did give permission for Mr. Harris not to appear tonight, but he too will come to the committee again and report his findings after he gets his feet wet in this new position. Super exciting.
That's really exciting.
Awesome.
Next item on the superintendent's report is about the Director of Human Resources. I'm disappointed to report that our Director of Human Resources has accepted another position. I wish her nothing but the best in her new venture. This is a competitive market, and HR professionals are in high demand, particularly during this difficult pandemic in the last 18-month period. With this being an especially busy time of year for HR on the school side, we're developing both short and long-term plans to ensure that all aspects of HR function are fulfilled. I'll still continue to lean on KP Law and Deborah Ecker, who's been helping me through the leave of absences, the FMLA requests, and other personnel issues. And then I inserted, just to be sure that the public was aware, that we will be going with the DESE mandate requiring mass K-12 until October 1st, at which time it will be revisited again following DESE guidance. And as we talked about at the public forum, there will be exemptions for medical, behavioral, mental health, and I would encourage families, and I'll send another communication out, to work with the team at their buildings. And then I want to talk about the high school schedule. Ms. Zotto and Mr. Kohut are here tonight to present, but a little bit of background for the public who may not know that last year we hired consultants, the district management group, to work with our school district to look at both our middle school and high school schedules. For as long as I've been in this position, there's challenges and benefits of being a smaller district. One of the challenges is, trying to share staff and trying to align schedules. And so it took most of the spring to get through the work that we were doing on these schedules, and we decided to make changes incrementally, and instead of doing both the middle school and high school schedule for this school year, we decided that the high school schedule was most important, and we will be making changes. We look forward to potentially making changes to the middle school schedule next year. So I turn it over to Mr. Kohut and Ms. Zotto and ask them to give their presentation.
Thank you, Superintendent Angelakis. I'm just going to share my screen. Please bear with me. Oh, I think I have a message that screen sharing is disabled by the host.
Okay.
Oh, great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to, I think, echo the sentiments of some of the school committee members and some of the students that we too, the faculty and staff of the high school, are really excited to see the kids next week. We've been working a lot on, obviously not just our bell schedule, but planning what the first few days and weeks will look like. Very excited to see everything. So I'll begin with this excerpt, and this is from some research that I read about school schedules. The ideal scheduling model for a particular district or school depends largely on which schedule matches the district's or school's priorities. And as this excerpt points out, that there really isn't a perfect schedule for all schools, and that it's all about the district's priorities and the school's priorities and building a schedule to meet those. And I'm excited that we were able to, throughout this process, to create a schedule that does correspond with our values and our priorities. So I'll get into the beginning of this, and kind of we're gonna have to go back and maybe remember a little bit about what the schedule looked like pre-pandemic. So why create a new schedule? And there were several challenges posed by this, and Superintendent Angelakis mentioned some of them. So one, if we remember back before the pandemic, for many years here, I want to say going back to 2011, 2012, we had a rotating waterfall schedule. And so that, because of that structure, it did create several challenges. One is, with scheduling, counseling, and any sort of additional services, it made that very challenging because of the times available in student schedules, those would change every single day. It made scheduling those types of appointments difficult. It also made scheduling appointments with families, for example, with student services, difficult because the schedule rotated. There were different times where people were available every single day, as opposed to a static schedule that would have consistent times over the course of the week. Schedule also offered limited options for additional support for struggling students. There was no time embedded in that schedule to work with students who maybe needed additional support. We recognized that, and we wanted to build a schedule that did build in that time. The rotating schedule also limited student access to off-campus opportunities, for example, internships or partnerships or dual enrollment. It's very difficult to manage any sort of internship or partnership with someone outside of the school when the schedule rotates every single day. And I think back to our old senior project that was great, but I do feel like not as many students were able to participate because they weren't able to have internships that would work with their schedule. And the way we had done it back then was that those students were still, they hadn't yet taken their AP exams, so they had to come in and continue to take their AP classes. And that made scheduling with partners very difficult. And the same for dual enrollment classes, right? Typically colleges aren't gonna have any schedule, at least any local colleges are not gonna have schedules that are gonna work that way. So it limited our ability to grow programs like that. For personnel, it made hiring part-time positions nearly impossible. We did have a teacher here years ago who was part-time, but it was very difficult for that particular teacher to be able to manage her weekly schedule because her classes that she taught were at different times each day of the week. The schedule also limited the ability to effectively share staff across multiple buildings, and Superintendent Angelakis pointed this out, that because our schedule does not line up with the middle school or the elementary schools, it's very difficult for us to share staff throughout the district. And some additional considerations. The pandemic has created an urgent need to provide a more equitable education for all students. And we've seen an increase in student mental health concerns only exacerbated by the pandemic, and that requires us to develop a schedule that directly incorporates social emotional learning into that daily schedule. So these are some quotes that came out of the research that the DM group did, anonymous quotes. And this is when folks were asked about their experiences with our previous waterfall schedule. I was fine with the waterfall schedule, I guess, but it's kind of nice to have the static schedule. The waterfall schedule was really confusing, and so many kids were unprepared for class because they forgot what the schedule was going to be. The waterfall schedule is terrible for kids who have been through trauma, especially coming out of the pandemic. We should prioritize having a static schedule. Students with disabilities and with diverse learning needs often struggle with the waterfall schedule. It needlessly complicates their academic experience. So what was the methodology in developing this schedule? And in my career, I've been here in this district for 15 years. We've had several different schedules. There have been several different committees that worked on creating Bell schedules. I felt like this process was by far the best in terms of getting consensus, all of the stakeholders working together and being very thorough in looking at data. So we partnered with, as Superintendent Angelakis pointed out, the district management group. They created focus groups and conducted interviews with over 50 district stakeholders that included district leadership, school level staff, students, and families. They also conducted a comprehensive analysis of district scheduling and staffing data for both 1920 and 2021, specifically related to schedule models, course offerings, student enrollment, and staffing. So some of the opportunities that they identified through their analysis. One was to consider shifting the structure of the Master Bell schedule away from a dynamic waterfall schedule to a more static schedule structure with greater consistency over the course of the school week. To improve the efficiency of the master schedule to allow for a greater diversity of courses to be taught and to maximize student enrollment in academic courses. To ensure that targeted interventions and extra help time are available for all students who struggle or are in need of extra support. And to evaluate learning community. So learning community is our advisory community, advisory block that we started last year. So when we met with DM Group and we did this schedule building and this analysis, it was happening. And so part of this was for us to do a deep dive on learning community and our social emotional learning and see if there's a way to incorporate that within the schedule. So their opportunity specifically is evaluate learning community and social emotional learning offerings within the master schedule for all students, especially clarifying how time is intended to be used. So we formed a guiding coalition. So who created our new schedule? So this is our guiding coalition. Again, these were folks from all over the district. Superintendent Angelakis, Dr. Bacon, Martha Raymond, Martha Seibert, myself, Sue Comparato, who's a teacher. She's also our scheduler here at Swampscott High School. Tom Reed, Eddie Rovey, Ms. Russo, Jennifer Donahue, Jennifer Fitzgerald, also SHS teachers. And then from the middle school, Mr. Kalishman, Natalie Powerchuk, who's a teacher there, but also scheduler, Tony Katz, SMS teacher, and Christine Collins, SMS teacher. So this guiding coalition, what we did was we took the data that DM Group presented to us, and throughout these multiple meetings of the guiding coalition, I'll walk everyone through this in a minute, that was how we developed a schedule. So the process started back in the fall of 2020, winter of 2021. That was when DM Group analyzed schedule and staffing data. They then presented their findings to us early in winter 2021, so that was district level leadership. We formed the guiding coalition, and then in the spring we held 3 meetings. After those 3 meetings, it was decided that we would continue moving forward with developing a new master schedule at SHS, but as Superintendent Angelakis pointed out, hit pause for the middle school. And part of that thinking on that was we knew that we were going to have a new high school schedule. We knew we had to do that anyway. We also knew at that time in May, kids were they were then eligible for vaccinations. So it was looking like at the time that when we returned, we would be more likely to have a more traditional schedule. At the time, we were unsure what that would look like for the middle school in terms of the pandemic. And as we all know, right, the pandemic does sort of call the shots, unfortunately. So it made sense at that time for us to move forward with building an SHS schedule and press pause with SMS. And I want to point out too that we have created a new bell schedule here at the high school, but this process is ongoing. There are going to be other opportunities that we realize over the course of this year that we can put in place for next year's schedule, because we're going to learn things. And so what happened was we met, we looked at 5 potential schedule drafts. So those were schedule drafts that we worked with DM Group on. Many of them are other schedules that other schools have currently in operation or have used in the past. And we voted in favor of one option. And then May and June of this past year, that was when the SHS members of the Guiding Coalition finalized our bell schedule. So here is our schedule. And I also have a sample of a model student schedule that will walk you through what this would look like on a student schedule. So rather than that 5-day waterfall, we have 2 days. We have an A day and we have a B day. Our periods are 75 minutes long. The day begins at the same time, right, at 8:10, and it ends at the same time at 2:30. 75 minutes, so if we walk through this, we'll have period 1, followed by period 2, and then we'll have our homeroom. And this is where we built in that flex block that was that I referred to and that DM Group had mentioned in terms of additional support for students. I saw this in action when I did a NEASC reaccreditation visit. It seems like a decade ago, but I believe it was only 3 years ago when I went to Lexington High School, and they called it I-block. So the way that we sort of borrowed from that. So the idea is every Monday, every student in the building is assigned to a homeroom that will meet at this time. During that homeroom period, the homeroom teacher will be able to assign students time to go to X block on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Teachers who are teaching courses can choose kids to come to class for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So an example of that might be in my English class, for example. If I want to work with a student who turned in an essay, I gave that student some feedback, and that student is struggling with a particular concept, I would then go in and schedule that student for X block maybe on Tuesday, right? Perhaps in math, that student was absent for some reason and needed to, I don't know, make up a quiz. Then they could attend X block on Wednesday for that additional support. Thursday, it could be another class. There's a lot of things that this flex block would allow for us to do. Another thing that I know that Lexington had talked about doing that I thought was really interesting was running clubs during this time. So that's a possibility for something to do as we get going this year. And the thinking on that is that most of our students, and the same is true in Lexington and in many schools, that most kids participate in athletics, right? I think for us it's around 70%. So that really does reduce participation in clubs. If we were to run clubs at some point during, like maybe monthly, right? There's at least a club meeting that occurs here. That would certainly increase our club participation, because those kids, it's really hard for them to obviously be able to attend Model UN meeting after school at the same time that they have a practice. Friday is our day for LC, or Learning Community. That's, again, the same program that we ran last year as part of our advisory. Last year when we ran LC, it was multiple times in a week. It was twice a week. We found that to be too much. It met too often. I think once a week is perfect. We got that same feedback from the kids and from the staff who ran it. The lunch period is period 3, and then the day ends with period 4. On the following day, the B day, we have period 5, period 6, then that X block, period 7, period 8, and then it rotates. I know folks, and I know the kids out there are probably curious about open campus. Will we keep open campus? Because we had open campus last year. So for seniors, yes, we will be having open campus for students if they, let's say, for example, they had a block here where they were unscheduled, right? those students would not have to come in during that block. Lunch, seniors would be able to leave campus during lunch. However, for our younger students, they'll have an open campus model, but it will essentially be on campus during lunch, right? So if those students would like to eat lunch outside, maybe perhaps down at Lower Jackson, they would be able to do that. I just want to address that now because I know it's not necessarily related to the schedule, but I'm sure folks are curious about that. Slides not clicking through, excuse me. Okay, so here it is with a sample student schedule. Move this up here. So this is an actual student schedule. So you see on that A day, they start with English 1, followed by algebra. They then head to homeroom or X block or LC. We'll call that flex block. After that, lunch, semester 1, they'll have an elective history of rock. Then semester 2, contemporary adolescence and SHS seminar. Bio would run that 4th period. Then on B day, they'll have Spanish, foundations of lifelong fitness, this again, so that flex block again, then lunch/marketing, and then world history. And you can see the lunch breakdown is listed here. We tried to keep the lunches sort of like what we had pre-pandemic because that seemed to work. Obviously, because of time on learning requirements, we can't have an hour-long lunch like we did last year. We were in a different place last year with the pandemic, and it made sense last year. However, this year it does not make sense. So there are districts with similar 4x4 schedules. Another way that it's described is a 4x4 AB schedule. Newton North runs one, Groton Dunstable, Weston High School, Columbia High School, and Columbia, Missouri. The only reason I know that, it seems a little odd, but that's because they will also work with DM Group. And that's how I knew that DM Group actually put us in touch with their leadership team in Columbia, Missouri. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. Are there any questions for myself or for Emily? I'm going to stop my share if that's okay with everyone.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Kohut.
Welcome.
Does anybody want to jump in?
I don't know, I like it, and I think it will help, because I think the waterfall, did have a lot of problems. So I guess it's a matter of getting the kids used to it and ironing out the wrinkles, you know what I mean? And I think it sounds like it would be great.
I have a question about time on learning with the flex block. Like, it seems like the kids that are getting assigned, who maybe need extra support or are getting assigned for that are getting direct instruction. But how about the kids that aren't, that are just not getting assigned to, are just staying in their homeroom class and doing study type of work?
Yep, so it does mean time on learning. What we do with that time for kids who are in homeroom, I imagine that to be asynchronous learning for those kids. So if those kids are not assigned a specific place to go, then they would be working on anything that's some sort of an asynchronous assignment. I think as the year goes on, it could be used for other things. Like I mentioned, I think a lot of us are focused on using it as an intervention, and that was kind of the original intention. However, it could be used to meet with kids, just like I think back to my English teaching days. It would have been great to have something like this if I had assigned an essay, to be able to meet with all of the kids in my class over the course of 3 X blocks in a row, even for 5 minutes, and have writing conferences. That would be terrific. And I know that our English teachers would like to do that. I know that Mr. Mastranzi's history department would love to be able to do that, to be able to meet with kids during that time. So it could be something that I see. I think initially it'll take a few weeks for us to get going, but I see that kids having unstructured time, I think that won't happen as often as the year gets going.
So, Mr. Kohut, I'm not sure I followed it very well. That block that was homeroom,
The flex block?
X block, and then LC.
Yes.
So are those, is that all essentially homeroom time, and then they can get pulled out to go to those other ones, or, okay?
Yeah, I mean, it has different purposes. So I imagine the homeroom time really to be on that Monday, it's for logistics, it's for planning, right? So announcements, it's for getting paperwork that sort of thing. And then it's also to sit down with that homeroom teacher and schedule time to have those kids assigned to any of those additional blocks, or teachers, requesting kids. And then LC, so one thing, maybe this will help explain things. The students in homeroom are the same students who are in learning community, so that's the same group. So our thinking, we did this last year with LC, our thinking was we wanted every kid to have what we called an anchor adult, right? So an adult that they would feel connected with. So that's multiple times throughout the week that they're going to be in these small groups, so let's say 12 kids. On average, it's about 12 in the homerooms, to be able to have an adult that they can check in with, who will, over the course of 4 years, if we start with a 9th grader, that teacher has that same those same kids over the course of 4 years, will really build a strong relationship with that adult. So I think of it as homeroom on Monday, and then it has other purposes throughout the week.
And why make the differentiation between the 3 X blocks and the LC?
So we knew we wanted to do LC, right? And LC has a curriculum, and it's something that so every day LC meets, it will be, every Friday, it will be, all the teachers running LC will be teaching the same thing.
Okay.
So it's a way to teach some of the social emotional learning. It's also a way to teach community building. That period, just having that flex block, also allows for us to do things like have assemblies without blowing up our bell schedule. Because in the old days, and there was really no other way to do it, but when we did have an assembly, we would have to essentially recreate our bell schedule, and it would always cut into class time. And as a teacher, it drove me a little crazy. So knowing if we could get out ahead of this and I could communicate to all staff and say, on such and such a day in 3 weeks, we're gonna have an assembly, or we're gonna have class meetings. Now you know, plan accordingly. And it's not gonna cut into class time. So it just gives us maybe that once a month, the ability to do those sorts of things. Or if we wanted to have speakers come in or Zoom with people, it gives us a little flexibility to do things like that as well.
And my second question is, can you explain that lunch block a little bit better? I didn't really understand how there was lunch and a class simultaneously.
Sure. So the way we do it, we're gonna do it the same way that we did it in the past, pre-pandemic. So based on numbers, really, certain subjects have first lunch, and then those other subjects that aren't scheduled for first lunch will be in class, right? So whoever's scheduled for lunch, that, like, let's say English, history, and math all have first lunch. So all those kids go to first lunch. Everyone who's in those other subjects, they're in their scheduled class for that period, and then probably about 20 minutes, half hour goes by to clean, prepare the lunchroom, and then the kids come down for second lunch.
Okay.
So it's really a space issue more than anything, to be able to accommodate everyone in the cafeteria at the same time. It's hard.
And is that just because of the size of the cafeteria, or is that directly pandemic related?
No, it's specifically because of the size of the cafeteria, yeah.
I had an additional question about the time. So it looks like each block now is 75 minutes. So
Yes,
in the past it was 60?
68.
Oh, 68. So it's not that big of a difference.
Yeah, we had looked at a few models, and some of them, there was one that we looked at and sort of kicked around and discussed, but it was all the way up to 90, and I remember when we had a block, and
I do too.
yeah, it was good for some things, but not great for everything. And I think we decided this was sort of in the middle, right, where it's a little bit longer. The 68, I think we feel like 68 is it's a good amount of time. An hour maybe is a little bit too short, so it's around there, right? It's 7 minutes longer, but it's about in that ballpark of where we were pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
I had a question for Mr. Kohat. I'm going back to the X block. I'm sorry, I can't speak through that. On the X block, you had mentioned that the teacher, a couple times, the teacher could schedule time with the student for extra help or whatever they thought. Is there a mechanism for the student to go to the teacher and request time? Is there a way for the student to do that if perhaps the teacher isn't aware of this, is an issue?
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up, John. So the software program that we're going to be using, it's called Enriching Students. So everyone will have an account. So the teachers have an account, and they can essentially choose a student, but the students can do the same. I just didn't want to roll it out right away. to the kids. Like, it's something that will roll out a little bit later, probably in September, because it's a lot to throw at everyone. But it's the same mechanism where they'll be able to go in and say, I want to meet with Mr. Kohut on Wednesday. And then I would get a notification on my calendar in enriching students that a student wants to meet with me. So that, yes, we will have that ability.
Okay, thank you.
So you could do multiples in one block, theoretically?
Absolutely, yep.
So does this get rid of the idea of after-school help?
Not necessarily. I think there will always be situations where that's needed. And it could be very well be just a situation where a student may be in that flex block period and just maybe needs to meet with two teachers that particular day for whatever reason. Having that additional time after school is just an additional level of flexibility. So yeah, we would still offer after school help as well.
It's exciting.
Great
Yeah.
things happening. I'm sorry, Glenn.
That's okay. Just a quick comment. First of all, this is great, Mr. Kohut.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just remember the waterfall schedule is just a nightmare for our house. 2 at a time, it's just no idea.
Sure.
I mean, I'm really excited about the potential for the X block, sorry. Especially on the club side, you know,
Sure.
for the kids who are almost like too cool for school, gives them an opportunity to try some very different things in a real safe environment. And you're right, if a child plays football, soccer, field hockey, whatever, they tend not to be able to do really anything outside of that. And, you know, and some of the things that could be offered are really would open some really great doors. And all I can think of is like, especially for juniors and seniors, and they're trying to, you know, build a resume for college. And I think it'll open a lot of opportunities. So my kudos to the entire team. I'm sure this was not easy. And I look forward to hearing more about it in the coming months.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, when I think it was 5 of you you sat down with the 5 different potential schedules and decided on one. How much consensus was there? Was there an obvious winner, or did it take some working to get some people on board?
There was an obvious winner for the finalists. I mean, there were a few there was this one that was slightly different. I mean, there were some, I don't remember specifically what it was, but it sort of resembled this with a slight difference. You know, there's one other wrinkle to the 4x4 AB that some other schools have done where they're running semester classes. So essentially, midway through the year, all the classes would change, right? And we just felt as though that didn't make sense for us. So that was one wrinkle that was sort of presented to the 4x4 AB. But the team decided that just didn't make sense. And then I know there were some others that incorporated like a longer block, like that 90-minute sort of style. And I think those were schedule models that we knew immediately were not going to work.
You know, I just want to reemphasize what Mr. Kohut said, that this is the first year. This is an exciting opportunity. But as with everything that we do in the district now, we take the opportunity to look at the end of the year, what worked, what didn't work, how to improve it, when do we start moving down to the middle school. But it was invaluable to have an outside consultant working with us and involving all of the stakeholders in this endeavor.
It's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Kohut.
Mr.
Thank you, Ms.
Kohut.
Sato.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Next presentation is, at last week's public forum, I spoke a little bit about the fact that the district had applied for state testing, which would include symptomatic testing, test and stay, and pool testing. So there was an application that had to be submitted, and I was notified this morning, actually, that we got access to the portal, and I thought that would be it, but Mrs. Mulcahy and I opened it, and I said, this is you. There's pages and pages of documentation. There's lots of data required and consent, and we have 5 days to do it. So it is the first step in being accepted into the program. And tonight, Mrs. Mulcahy is going to give an overview of what that might look like. So share your screen.
I'm not actually attached.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also want to make sure you have a microphone, so.
So I guess, can you click on the presentation, Mrs. O'Connor? It's linked in the superintendent's report. It is,
Wish me luck.
there it is.
Okay,
So now it's not going up there.
okay, hold on.
You're getting so good at this.
Nope. Oh, present.
Mr. Dulett, how do we get Miss O'Connor's screen to,
Do I need to share my?
Share yours through Zoom.
Okay.
wow, she's getting good. Miss Matthew Knowles would be very proud of Miss O'Donnell.
No, click the one you want to share.
What?
Click on the screen you want to share, like which,
I don't know.
I'm not sure which one it's open on.
So, no, this is not,
You have your video off at the bottom.
I'm pretty sure I do.
Turn that on and then share screen.
Oh, God. I apologize. Oh. I cannot do it unless I quit the app. So, is there?
Like, do you have are you watching, are you
No,
on Zoom?
so
Is
in
anyone
order
else on Zoom?
Can I ask, Glenn, could you,
Are you on Zoom?
wait, but let me, I will make you a co-host. I
Yeah.
had to, in order to turn my camera on, because this is new, a new
You have to
computer for me, I would have to redo it, and I don't want to drop out. So I just made,
Make him a host though.
I did, oh, okay.
Because then, so make him a host. And that way when you quit, he's still there. The whole Zoom's still there.
Okay,
So Glenn's
So-
on. So now if he shares his screen, right? Jeez.
oh, look at that.
Woo! Takes a little extra time, but we get there.
There's our,
And then if you don't mind just hitting present.
Ms. Mackie
The top.
Knowles waits anxiously in
I
the
know,
background,
she
ready to
stands-
kill us.
she stands.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you for letting me share a little bit of information about the testing that we'll be offering. We're still in the beginning process, and we still have a little bit more work to do, as Superintendent explained today. But the big thing is our mission is to minimize the disruption of learning for students and families and keep students in school. And I think that this testing will actually help in that. So if you don't mind going to the next slide.
You want to come drive?
Huh?
Want to come drive?
Or you can give it to her.
Oh, do you want me to take?
Yeah.
Sure. All right, thank you. Sorry about that. All right. So a little background information. During the 2021 school year, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, and the Executive Office of Health and Human Services introduced COVID-19 screening and diagnostic testing in the school setting as an additional mitigation strategy for COVID-19. It was the first program of its kind nationwide. This year, they improved their testing options, and districts and schools are participating in the programs will receive the test kits, support for testing services providers, and testing software to track all the results, all at no cost through the district to the end of the school year under a single contract through CIC Health. So I have just a little bit of an information old video from CIC Health.
Kids need socialization. They need other kids. They need a change of pace from, as much as they may like their parents. Kids really want to be back in school.
What administrators have been telling me is that this has been an incredibly tough year.
When school started opening up again, my 15-year-old couldn't have been happier. The only thing that she was really disappointed about was that not that many of her classmates came back.
Bringing the students back to a level of normalcy is very important for their overall health and well-being.
been in public health my entire career. This crisis has been like no other. We know an incredibly important part of stopping this pandemic is stopping transmission. And testing not only helps keep your school safe, it also makes it so people that are unknowingly infected do not spread in the community. It makes a difference for all of us. What testing does is it allows us to have comfort that we will recognize when outbreaks occur and be able to be transparent about what the levels of virus are in the school.
The way we run school testing now, which just takes a few minutes once a week, is an incredibly light touch on the school. It really takes very little time, and it gives everyone, the teachers, the parents, confidence that they are not sending kids into a school around other kids that are transmitting the virus.
CIC Health has been a great partner to us here at BPS. They've been instrumental in all of the moving pieces. So to date, we've administered over 5,000 pool tests. It allows us to bring more students back and to feel secure that they'll be safe.
There are a lot of ways to test for COVID and many different approaches being used in schools. We here at CIC Health have probably used every possible technology and approach. The testing methodology that we found that we like best is what's called source pooled testing. It's a form of pooled testing where approximately 10 kids put nasal swabs in one tube. It has the advantages of being very cheap because the cost to process that one tube is what it used to cost to process individual tests. So it's about 10 times cheaper.
Here are the advantages of the pooled testing approach. It's highly accurate. These are the same molecular tests that are used to make a diagnosis. Down to pretty young ages, the kids can self-swab just in the front of their nose and get highly accurate results. By pooling these together, that allows us to know whether there is infection in the classroom or not without collecting personal health information, making a lot of the management of the process so much simpler to operate.
The whole process is so light touch on the school. We know that it keeps COVID from spreading in the schools.
We are now deploying this school testing program in more than 500 schools, and that number is growing on a weekly basis. We have done this and made it smooth and accurate, and it has made it easy for schools to keep these programs going.
The students are adapting greatly. They know the steps, they understand it, and they're able to perform it. Before, you wouldn't know if a student had COVID, if they were asymptomatic. And now we have a way of knowing and acting quickly. There's a sense of feeling safe within the schools.
If we can help, and we can help you in whatever way we can, that's what I want to be doing.
Seeing the students come back, watching them play at recess, seeing them smile, it means everything to me.
All right, so the big question is why testing? So while the novel coronavirus is still circulating in our community, we can never get our risk down to zero. However, in-school testing can help us identify the potential outbreak early and give us the confidence we need to safely keep the students and staff in our schools. Here are some of the other mitigation tools that we have in place. So symptom checking, we don't want individuals coming into school sick. DESE's new mask mandate. Social distancing at 3 feet when possible. We've improved our ventilation studies, increased and promoted hand hygiene, routine cleaning and disinfecting, contact tracing, and COVID testing will be the next defense. So, also, this is supported and endorsed by the CDC's K-12 school operational strategies. Routine COVID safety checks and diagnostic testing for students as an additional layer of the safety in school in moderate, substantial, and high transmission areas. And I just think it's important that we acknowledge the fact that as of August 16th, Swampscott was officially elevated to a high transmission zone.
This is just, when you, the link's in here, but it'll take you to this little chart, just so you know, so I just quickly inputted it for you. So, Swampscott Public School is excited to be participating in this program that will be offered to all students and staff. And by providing this school testing, we can keep kids and staff safe. We can catch cases before they spread to other students and staff, keep our schools and after-school programs open by preventing further time away from in-person learning and friends, by identifying whether it is just a simple cold or COVID. And then just by also stopping the spread, avoiding infecting members of your household and or community members. Oops, sorry about that. So the different types of testing that will be offered is symptomatic testing, test and stay, and routine pool COVID testing. So I just want to talk about the difference between the testing real quick. So what is symptomatic testing and what is test and stay? So symptomatic testing will be used diagnostically when individuals present or develop symptoms while at school. It's a shallow nasal swab sample that are collected by a school-trained nurse using either Binax Now, which is a rapid antigen test, or another approved diagnostic test from DESI. So it might not be Binax, but it'll be the other brand that they're using. But as a reminder, individuals should not be coming to school sick. We had quite too many incidences of that last year, and we really just want to stress that this is not an excuse to come into school sick. Test and stay, this is a new program that they're running, will be used diagnostically for in-school close contacts only. It's a shallow nasal swab sample collected by the school nurse using Binax Now rapid antigen testing or the other approved antigen test from DESI. And what's important to realize is that testing is administered daily for 7 days from the day of exposure. Individuals will not need to quarantine at home once identified as a close contact from an in-school exposure because they are being tested daily. If the individual becomes sick at any time, they must stay home. So pool testing, I know the video really talked about it, but what we applied for was the routine COVID pool testing with the lab-based follow-up. And what that is it's the individuals who participate in the pool testing will provide 2 shallow, either nasal or saliva samples, and they're kept separate before going to the lab. The lab will group them, and then if that group test comes back positive, they already have that additional test that they need to figure out and identify who the positive one in that pool test is. There's different options, so that's the one that we applied for, and I'm hoping we get approved. If not, then we would have to follow up with additional testing afterwards. So what are the benefits of participating in this testing program? So ultimately it decreases learning loss. Students and staff stay in school, and they also stay in their after-school activities. Individuals who develop symptoms at school can test and possibly stay at school depending on their results and how severe the symptoms are. Individuals who become close contacts while at school will no longer need to quarantine and miss school if they are involved in the test and stay. Individuals in extracurricular activities like sports, clubs, after-school programs can also stay in their activities as a close contact, and this will also help ensure that those programs stay open. So, do individuals have to sign up? Testing is optional. However, it is very important for you to understand that if a student and faculty member chooses not to participate in school testing, they will need to follow DESI and DPH quarantine guidelines that may require them to miss school. So because of this is my recommendation to the district, that the district implements a mandatory COVID screening pool test list. It should be developed with the guidance of the CDC and from the data collected that indicated recurring trends of after-school activities that resulted in a surge of COVID-positive cases and close contacts that created significant time away from school last year. This will help decrease the risk of spread by testing for asymptomatic individuals and help keep these activities stay open. The district should also consider adding or removing any after-school program, activity, or class that produces an increase of respiratory droplets or results in large trends of COVID cases to this mandatory routine testing list, or if trends start to develop. The district should also send prior notification to parents about the additional testing.
So let's just cut to the chase. The majority of our outbreak last year came through athletics.
Yeah.
And so I believe this translates, I don't want the community panicking that this is every after-school club and activity. We feel like it's important for the pool testing in the athletic department. And that's something that we asked the committee to consider, because that was where the cases, we had huge outbreaks, and it's just for your consideration.
So are you suggesting that it only be used in the sports program?
Well, because we have the test and stay, and because we have the other tests, we have we're proposing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Amanda, that the pool testing only be used in the athletic department.
At this time.
At this time?
Yeah.
Yes.
The good thing about the way that the systems are, these programs are set up is that we can at any point decide not to continue with this certain type of testing or continue or start it up. So at this time, what I would recommend is that we do look at the data from last year, and we look at what CDC's guidance is right now that is saying that in high transmission areas that this additional testing is implemented, and that is the routine surveillance testing, which is the pool testing, and it should be in the areas that we saw large surges, which is sports. But I would also consider things like band, because in band you're increased respiratory droplets, choir. So if we start seeing other groups or other after-school activities, we can put them on and say, you know what, we want to make sure that we're catching those positive cases before they spread.
And we have had a positive case this week with close contacts.
That is correct.
So can I just ask a question? Excuse me. I agree with you. I mean, athletics is kind of a no-brainer. But given that we hope to be as back to normal as possible, so we are talking band, we're talking drama, that...
We're talking lunch.
I mean, lunch for that matter. Is there a way to make it a little bit more global than just athletics,
I think I guess my philosophy on the way we do things is we have to start small and expand. We had a leadership today and was talking about how I'm a little bit, we're only doing the high school schedule because I want to have time to reflect on that. The changes we're making at the middle school drop-off, we're only making certain changes and we'll add to them. And I look at this as doing the same thing. I don't like to jump in with all. First of all, there's the staffing. We still have the question of, are we going to have people, when we fill out all this paperwork, are people coming to help our nurses? Because our nurses are very nervous right now that this burden is going to fall on them, and rightfully so.
Right.
So are we getting that assistance? And so the recommendation of starting slow is where Amanda and I are at, and that as we get through this process, okay, great, if you have lots of testers coming out to help us, then we can look at expanding it.
Right.
But I 100% agree, band, trumpets or whatever they have, we have to think about those things. But if we look back at last year and think about where were the most cases, it was through athletics. So that's just my philosophy, and people don't have to agree or disagree. I just hesitate to jump in both feet and make everybody nervous. And I know our nurses are currently very nervous, are they getting help?
No, I think your thoughts are in the plan is right on. I mean, as you said, Amanda, you can add it at a drop of a hat if you really
Right.
really
I mean,
needed to.
and that's the benefit of these programs is if we start seeing trends of low cases, we don't have to do the surveillance testing anymore. I mean, I spoke with the athletic director and Mr. Kohut, and they both think that it'd be beneficial to incorporate this for at least the after-school activities, mostly sports. Just because, where he said tonight, 70% of the high school students are involved in sports, that's a big portion of the school. So if we can catch an asymptomatic case, that's keeping the sports open. It's keeping their social activities alive. And this year we're really pushing for that social emotional well-being. And this is a key component that can really benefit and keep those.
Are we going to be mandating anyone who plays a sport has has to sign?
I think that's what we've got to figure
So-
out.
Like, that's what, I mean,
Yeah, so let me, so what what I'd recommend is that, because it is an extracurricular activity, that we would enforce that if they do test, then they can participate. If they don't test, they will not participate. And this also helps when they play against other districts.
Yeah.
You know, other schools last year implemented testing like this. We did not, because we didn't want to get involved with the pool testing last year. We just did the symptomatic testing. So I know Salem's also kind of going down that trend too, and I think it's just that next protection that we need, because we need our students to come into school.
So I know that last year that symptomatic testing that we offered had a sign-up rate of like none.
We had actually a lot of people sign up, but a lot of people just didn't, like, we didn't test as much as I would have liked.
Okay.
Because either the children coming in the office weren't ones who signed up, and or we would just send them home. So this year, the way that it's rolled out, we will be increasing our testing.
So can you explain, I have to say, I feel a little bit dense about what's happening where.
So all schools would be involved. So everybody has the choice to either opt in or opt out of testing, first of all. And then what happens is each school, we will have symptomatic testing and our test and stay. For right now, what I would love to see is to keep our sports and athletics and extracurricular activities open would be to mandate them do pre-screening testing, which basically means, hey, I don't have COVID today, I can play. And then that way they're not spreading it to their teammates. So every school would be participating in it. However, the pool and the surveillance testing right now, I would just like to focus and ease into at least keeping our sports open.
Great. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, so how would it work? Would every student be tested, or are you just gonna do a random 10 out of this team like it was showing?
So that's a great question, and once we get more information, we have to fill out those documentations. They will actually provide us a coordinator who has been working with these programs, and they can really sit down with me and we can organize it so it's not going to intervene with school. And also it might be best, so like let's use football for an example. So maybe on Monday, half the team gets put into pool testing on Monday and the other half gets pool tested on Friday. They'll really work with us to try to make it successful, because ultimately that's one of the key things of keeping the programs open.
Okay.
So we're not asking for a mandate tonight because we don't even know what we don't know yet.
Right, and I mean, to me, pool testing was sort of like random samples here and there to try to catch something, but what you're talking about is like everybody. It's not really random, right? That's everybody.
So it would be more focused towards the actual sports. So we want to make sure that asymptomatic students who are playing sports right now are caught before they spread it to their teams.
So
And then that whole team is either out because they're quarantining, or they're involved in our test and stay, which also increases the testing that has to be done in the school.
Right, because that can happen regardless, the test and stay.
Mm-hmm. So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
sorry.
I just asked, don't even want to ask this question. Do we have any guidance from our friends at the MIAA what they are going to do? Because I have no problem with mandating testing whatsoever. My challenge would be, let's say Swampscott does, and as an example, Salem doesn't. How do we even walk?
Only playing teams.
Yeah,
that are
how do we
also-
walk that labyrinth? Because now go back to what you just said, Pam, is we do want to go relatively something that the district can kind of deal with. I know the answer to the question, but has the MIA
I'll be honest with you, I
any
haven't
guidance?
pursued that piece of it. We'd have to pursue that piece of it. I mean, Amanda had conversations with the athletic director. I did not. So I don't even know where the MIA, to make up an answer right now would be.
No, that's
really-
fine.
I don't know.
I mean, I think it's exciting. I think it's great that we're actually looking into all this, and I think maybe coming back at our next meeting
Yes.
of much more data, and you guys will understand this labyrinth of things, what you're approved of, what we're not.
Oh, there's link upon document.
Yeah, I bet.
So if you did not sign the agreement to be to be test and stay, you go home.
You would have to, yeah.
Which
So
is sort of like what happened last year, because
Right.
we just assumed, once you were experiencing any kind of symptoms, we assumed you were positive and you went home.
But,
So
may I,
this-
may I talk about the consequences to that? Is that
There's no remote learning.
there's no remote learning, we're not doing live Zooming, and so you'll get an asynchronous packet of work to do while you're home. The teachers cannot be put in that position of doing multiple platforms again. So it doesn't make sense to not sign up for this, in that you'd be able to stay and engage with your classmates. So the consequences are different this year than they were last year, because this is of the availability of this program.
I just,
How long would you be at home if you had to?
So you would have to follow the regular DESI guidance at least 7 days and possibly return on day 8. So they're missing a full week, or depending on how that rolls into that school week pattern.
All right, I'm switching gears. I'm trying to process everything you said.
Yeah, it's a lot, I know.
And I guess I'm trying to understand, just on a practical level, using your football team example, is there a possibility that the whole team can't play even though
So
a large chunk is vaccinated? I guess I'm trying to understand how this works.
Unfortunately, yes. So last year, well, right now, because of the Delta variant, first of all, there's the breakthrough cases. And right now, as DPH says, that vaccinated people don't have to quarantine. So we're talking about the large majority of individuals who are unvaccinated, but that could change depending on how this Delta variant rolls out. So if someone is, if an individual becomes a close contact in school, they have the option right now to do either in-school testing, which is the test and stay, or they will have to quarantine at home for the asynchronized work.
if they're not vaccinated or no
If they're
matter
not
what?
vaccinated.
Okay.
But at any point, if anybody is a close contact and they get symptoms, they have to go home and quarantine for 10 full days. So really catching these cases prior, these asymptomatic people, is going to be an advantage for the school and keeping these kids in their school classrooms where they should be and in their sports. So,
Doesn't sound so great for the kid that has to stay home, though.
Like if they had the flu.
Yeah.
What about, is there any data that this company has shared about if there was a higher rate of diagnosis than in other sample communities? I ask the question because I look at my child, who was COVID positive, who never had any symptoms. And I would imagine if we were testing, and I am not a doctor, so I caveat that, obviously. Are we going to wind up with a bunch of kids who are testing positive for COVID who are not problematic?
well, if they're COVID positive, then they are problematic and they shouldn't be in the school anyways.
Regardless.
It doesn't, there's no such thing as false positive anymore.
No, I'm not suggesting false
Oh, I'm
positive,
sorry.
but I'm suggesting like,
If they don't have symptoms, they can still be a transmitter.
Right.
So,
And
that
that's the whole point of pool testing, is trying to catch those asymptomatic cases, because I could be COVID positive right now and not know it. I don't have any symptoms. But if I was playing a sport or sitting next to a student, there is a risk that I could be giving it to that individual next to me, and we wouldn't even know it until maybe they developed symptoms and then got tested. And then they're bringing it home, and they might not even know they have it. And that's the whole problem with this pandemic, and one of the benefits of getting people involved in this testing. And last year, while I was doing some research on this, I spoke with one of the health directors over at Salem and Newton, who did pool testing last year, and because it is optional and voluntary, they had a lot of people sign up, and nobody came for the testing day because it was still optional. And they ran into a lot of problems that way, and then they were getting positive cases in the classrooms, which then result in a large number of close contacts and so on. So it's...
I mean, it just sounds like, the goal is to keep it out of the classroom entirely, or sports team or whatever that is. And if you catch one person
that's better than them transmitting it to, you know, the entire team, and a game has to be forfeited or postponed. Really?
A lot of last year was rescheduling. I mean, you could talk to the athletic director about it, but a lot of it was large amount of kids on the team all had to quarantine because of the practice schedules they were doing or whatever game they were participating. And then it was rescheduling it, or they had to miss those games, and it was really disruptive to their athletic program as well. So, you know,
I just think, you know, this information is being presented to the committee tonight for your consideration as we go through this process of filling out the documentation, finding out what we're eligible for, what kind of help assistance we're going to be provided. Mrs. Mulcahy will come back again, update you once we're in the next phase of this, but this is kind of an overview of the 3 different testing models, I guess, that we're pursuing and why we're pursuing them.
Yep.
It's not going to start tomorrow, it's not going to start next week.
Right.
We need more time on this.
Yeah, I would want to know also from our attorneys and things, what kinds of, obviously, this is coming from DESE, but what kinds of legality there is, what kinds, you know, I would imagine that a lot of people are going to be worried about HIPAA issues.
Do you know specifically of districts mandating it for athletics?
I know that Salem has implemented some sort of testing. I think they might be doing outside testing, but they have to bring it like a negative result. Hold on.
I mean, I know private schools that are doing this, but
Well,
that's different.
But also, and I'm no attorney, this is my educator hat, you know, athletics, to play athletics is a privilege, and in order to have that privilege, you may have to follow certain rules, which you do, and so a mandate in this arena for me makes sense, but I would want to run it by council, obviously.
Right, because it definitely sounds like to me that using the point, and again, I'm not an attorney either, and I have no problem with any of the testing if you want to, you know, it's kind of pay to play. But if we needed to get around certain language or rules, you would add it to the student handbook. If you play athletics, just like you have to maintain a certain grade point average, just like you have to maintain, you can't get in trouble at school, you also have to do this. And I think, again, not a lawyer, but that protects everybody. You know, it's not like you're saying you can't go to English class. That's a different animal because you have to have so many hours in a given week in a given school year. But not.
Except we are saying you can't go to English class if you don't test, because then you go home.
I didn't hear that.
No, individuals who participate in the pool testing, if it was mandatory, they would resume their activities as usual.
No, what Amy was saying is if you don't test and stay, if you choose not to test and stay,
that's
then
their
you are
option.
going home, and you're going to miss English.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I get it, it's very complicated, there's multiple layers, but
It is, and I mean, anybody who plays fall sports, they've already signed up. They've already signed
They're
up.
already
They've already
practicing.
signed their
Started.
papers,
Right.
and they already
I mean, look,
paid,
I
right?
personally, I don't have any problem with it, but that's me personally. I'm just imagining that there are going to be, you know,
I think there's gonna be
these
a lot of people
issues.
that have issues.
I do, and I agree, there is issues with it, but I think the benefit of protecting our students and making sure that they can stay in school and continue in those sports, and last year we did have to shut down sports repetitively because of COVID cases and too many close contacts, and that actually resulted in closing down the whole school.
Yeah.
So,
But wouldn't the test and stay then help with that? If you had one case, you don't have to shut the whole.
Yes,
team
well,
down,
that's
what
you
she's saying.
test-
but
Yeah.
that's
I
exactly
know,
what
but
I'm
that's
saying, yeah.
different than the pool testing, than mandatory pool testing in order to even play in the first place.
Well, no, because
Like-
test and stay would just be for the close contacts.
Right,
So-
but your teammate is your close contact. Someone is positive, you don't shut the whole team down, you then test everybody to stay, as opposed to saying you have to be tested before you.
Right,
can
but the
even
point
walk
is to try to make
You have
sure
to
that they're
start-
catching it before they get the close
Yeah, you have
contact.
to start
Because
at a base.
we have to, yeah, we want to catch
I
it
know,
before.
but like, you could do that and then you could be exposed the next day after your test. Do you know what I'm saying?
And that's
So are you
true.
gonna pool test every day? Do you know what I'm saying?
No,
Like-
I totally understand what you're saying, and I agree. However, it's a great option to try to catch those cases before it spreads to too many people. That will result into more test and stay, which is increase in-school testing, and then also the risk of them bringing it home to family members, which will affect the community as a whole. So I'll just finish up with just saying that I also, some ways to help your child if you are interested in doing it and how you can prepare for testing, is really just communicating with your child, explain to your student that they are contributing to keeping the school, everyone at the school safe, practice at home. And we have some videos that I will release in a little bit, that's a part of the parent tool for COVID testing. And then just remind your student on the day of testing that they will be tested and praise them for their contribution and keeping the kids, keeping everyone safe. And, I can't stress enough that this testing will help minimize the disruption of learning and for students and families, and will keep students in schools where they desperately need to be. So, thank you.
Mrs. Mulcahy, I can't thank you enough for laying this out the way that you've laid it out for the committee tonight. I do know there are lots of questions. I would encourage the committee to write those questions down, and as we navigate this portal, we'll come back and share it with all of you, but there are a lot of questions that still remain. I think the point of this presentation was to share the different models of testing and how we envision them keeping kids in person and learning and safe. So I would thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you. I do appreciate it, and I know we could sit here and talk about questions all night, but we have, obviously, we just need to hear more.
Of course.
Yep. I am going to throw one more out though, Amy. That's okay?
Please.
Yeah, so I appreciate, Amanda, what you've said, and, like I've said on other topics, I've actually researched this a little bit, and I know other communities are doing some of this. I haven't seen this pooled thing with some other communities. I've seen the test and stay in the symptomatic one. So I just, kind of to Glenn's point, I just would like to know as well what other communities are doing. So
the test and stay is brand new.
Yeah, we're not going to be an outlier on this thing as far as this pooled thing. It just I'm not, and again, I'm happy to be corrected, but I'm just not seeing that as kind of the go-to option along with the other two with some of the other communities that I've looked at.
I can say that pool testing occurred in numerous districts last year. We did not participate. We chose not to. I can certainly get you a list of those communities. The test and stay is brand new, so that wouldn't have occurred last year. Some districts participated in the Buy Next Now, the symptomatic testing, the way we did, but I can certainly bring back to the committee a list of districts that utilized pool testing last year. Because
last year, I'm not really, I'm just kind of going forward. That's kind of what I'm interested in. So I know what we did last year.
Well, how many are in the same position that we're in, who are considering this?
Well, people are still signing up. The first round was to be signed up by August 20th. I can put out an informal even to the North Shore superintendents, and of that 20 who comes back with what are they participating in, I can bring those numbers back.
That'd be great.
So, yeah, I think just to follow up on that is that a lot of the COVID protocols that DESE released is based off of off of all the testing. So you'll see a lot more school districts start to sign up for these programs because the protocols that are sent out from DESE are really trying to keep the kids in school.
Yeah.
And to do that, they have to be involved in this testing. So we might not have large numbers right now, but over the next few weeks, there will be more schools involved.
I can get the numbers. I can do it to the entire listserv of the Commonwealth, who's participating in various testing programs and what programs, and try to bring it back to the committee. That would be helpful. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So each year, I remember when it first became superintendent, people would say, "Oh, how are you enjoying your summer off?" And that is the furthest thing from the truth. I think the summer months are incredibly busy, not only for central office and principals, but for the facilities department in particular. And each year I've tried to bring the end of summer facilities update to the committee, and this year I'm pleased that our Director of Facilities, Max Casper, is here tonight to present a summary of the facilities projects that took place during the summer. Glenn, could you bring up his presentation too?
Yeah, absolutely. Whoops.
Or make him the...
Yeah, I'm so ready.
Share screen button.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Angelakis, and thank you to the committee. Thanks, Glenn. Okay, I just have a brief presentation tonight to give the committee an update on the status of some of our summer projects and basically what has been happening with the facilities department over the summer. As the superintendent referenced, the summer is not a time off for facilities, for our custodians and our facilities staff. It's actually probably our busiest time of the year, as we're trying to jam in as many things as possible in what seems to be a shorter and shorter period of time. And as this is my first full summer as the facilities director, I would have to say this is the shortest summer of my life. It just was over like that. So I just have a few slides, and I'll go through them. So I wanted to start out by giving an overview of some of the things that regularly occur. These are, borderline automatic that all the custodial staff and our staff do every summer. Stripping and waxing all the floors in all the school buildings, filter changes for our HVAC equipment, building and fire department annual inspections. I'm actually happy to report that was completed this year. That was delayed last year due to the pandemic, but we walked through with the fire inspector and the building commissioner and have updated certificates of inspection for all the schools, which is actually more pressing this year than ever before because the extended day requires those certifications for their state licensing. So always an important thing, especially important this year. There's cleaning that occurs during the summer that doesn't happen as much during the regular year. High cleaning events, deeper cleaning, rugs, that type of thing. Boiler maintenance was something we're especially targeting now. We have a outside vendor go through all the boilers in anticipation of heating season. And then, standard stuff like replacing light bulbs and ceiling tiles that have been damaged over the course of the year. Every 2 years, the wood chips are replaced at all the playgrounds, and this is one of the biannual years for the wood chip replacements. That's actually happening this week. And then we're also been targeting roof maintenance more, emphasizing cleaning the roof drains and bringing in some outside companies to go through the roofs and do some regular maintenance and target those leaks. We have a lot of roof space and a lot of flat roofs, and it's not uncommon at all for leaks to spring up, and to kind of have a maintenance program in place for those to chase that down is really proactive, and we've been doing that more and more. And then, different painting projects happen in different schools, smaller interior spaces, certain rooms that get targeted, and that happened over the summer as well. So I'm going to jump into some of the larger stuff that's been happening as well. So here's some projects that I'm happy to report are completed in full at some of the schools. We had a few rooms here at the high school, B210, B213, and B208, where we made some major electrical and acoustical modifications. There were some tables, like permanently affixed tables in 2 of the rooms at the high school that Mr. Kohut wanted to change sort of the use of the room a little bit, and that involved some rewiring and recabling to get electrical boxes out of the way, and we got rid of the tables, and that was completed. And then we had one room in particular that has no windows and was an echoing issue, and we made some modifications to the HVAC system, added some Tectum wallboard for acoustical purposes, and those are some nice improvements in there. We had a project here at the high school. I put a picture and it doesn't give you the full effect, but we changed all the light fixtures in the field house from fluorescent to LED fixtures. So much more energy efficient, better controlled with sensors. And this was a cool project that we did with National Grid through a program called On-Bill Refinancing. So it wasn't actually capital funded through the town. What National Grid does is they figure out how much you are expected to save over time by this energy efficiency upgrade, and then finance it at 0% over a certain number of years, thinking that your savings on the energy from the fixtures will make it so you don't even notice the difference in your bill. So we get a 0% loan, new fixtures, more efficient, and it's really a nice long-term thing. Over at the middle school for the preschool program, we did a fenced-in area in the rear that Martha Raymond wanted. It was really a great idea. It gives them a nice little play area in the rear of the building. If you're familiar out there above the bowl, it's kind of hairy. If you were to have kids out there, they could kind of fall off the hill. So this creates a safer space and a good play area out there that looks really good. That fencing just went up recently, and everyone likes it. We did a nice project at the Clark School where we painted all of the exterior trim. It was in pretty rough shape, so there's one picture in there showing one of those grills that's a nice new blue, and all that yellow trim on the addition for the lift and everywhere has been freshly painted, and there's a follow-up project that I'll get into on the next slide that kind of aligns with that painting project, but that painting is completed. And then we did some work to the portables. I know they've been here for a while, so we did do a run through and do some flooring repairs and some door repairs, and Garrett is also targeting some hanger replacements underneath the deck structure just to try and get a few more years out of those. I know they're past their anticipated or expected time period in town, but we will need them for a couple more years here.
Has to be 5 years.
30 years later.
And last year, the middle school sign on the front of the building unfortunately fell down, but we were able to fix that and replace it. That's back up and looking good and shiny and new. The next slide, there's one picture that didn't come through from my presentation, but not a big deal. These are some other projects that we've been pushing forward over the course of the summer that we're either in the middle of or are kind of slated to get going and have been in engineering and in procurement. And there's some really important projects here that I wanted to touch on and give a little description of. So I'm very happy to report that the middle school roof replacement project started this week. Contractors, yes.
I don't think I've ever been so excited to see a truck. Jason's been wondering if the boom was coming through his window a couple of times, but
yeah, it's been a long haul to get to this point, but you know we literally have sections of roof coming up and new roof going down with insulation, and it's going to be an ongoing project for the next couple months, and we're being really careful about how we're phasing it and being very sensitive to the students that will be in the building next week, and the project will be ongoing. So there's been a lot of complexity to that project, but again, it's good news. We're up on the roof, we're working, and it's moving forward, and we really need it. I mean, there's that major sections of that roof are in failure and really need replacement. So awesome news on that front. And then what I referenced earlier, sort of the second phase to that Clark exterior painting project is a large portion of the gutters were removed and they were in really bad shape. And after we've now painted the trim, we have fresh gutters going up on everywhere on the building other than the gymnasium, which had newer gutters. For some reason, they must have been replaced more recently. And also at Clark, it's the same contractor that ends up doing the gutters. That's why I've lumped them together. But the breezeway roof, which connects the main building to the gymnasium, that's also been hurting now for a while, and some active leaks, and that is being fully replaced. We went through a few iterations of the state contract process to get a contractor lined up, but we happy to report again that is contracted. It will be done before school starts next Wednesday, so that's really good news. I was happy to tell the principal that. She was eager to get that one done. And then another big project that we have contracted is the Hadley Gymnasium ERV replacement. So this was one of the last lingering locations in the district where we weren't happy with the quality of the ventilation. And we funded this through capital last year, and it was out to bid. The bids were due last Wednesday, and we did get a contractor come in at a reasonable figure that we've contracted with. We'll have a site meeting with them likely next week. We're still waiting for them to confirm the schedule. They're sourcing the units. It's an ERV unit which will sit on the small roof, which is just above the gymnasium. And it basically is an energy efficient way to take air from the gym, circulate it with fresh air, bring fresh air in that has been partially heated, and it'll create a really well ventilated space, which is, again, one of our worst ventilated spaces currently. And then there's a project at the middle school. It's the middle school boiler room upgrades. We're not doing a major boiler project there, but last year we migrated that system to glycol, which means that we changed it from just straight water in the system to an antifreeze portion in the system to avoid freeze-ups. That was all related to the ventilation work we were doing. And sort of as a follow-up project to that, we're adding in some new expansion tanks and a glycol feeder, an automatic feeder. We don't need to get into the technicalities of that, but it's good. It's not a major thing. It just kind of builds off of some good things we did last year and will allow us to continue to get some more life out of that existing boiler plant at the middle school. And then we have a few upcoming green communities projects at Clark and middle school. These are controls and some piping projects. These are Green Communities is an awesome program we've been a part of for many years, the town of Swampscott, and we've gotten over $1 million over the course of our participation. And this is largely grant funded, over $100,000 that we're just waiting on the contract to come back from the state, and we'll be kicking those off. A smaller project, we're going to be replacing some of the fencing out in front of Hadley and repairing some of the other fencing around that building. Some of it's in pretty rough shape, and it's kind of a hazard in spots, so we thought that was a good smaller project. That'll be part of our elementary school capital project that we were funded at town meeting. So there's a few good projects coming up that are part of that program. And then we're also working through some tech room HVAC improvements at the high school and the field house. This is another project that was funded at the annual town meeting last year. We had noticed that the temperature in some of the tech rooms throughout the high school was concerningly high, and we've been addressing that. We've already actually started. We've replaced some of the exhaust fans and have that under control. And related to that, over at the field house, a tech room and TV studio sort of sprung up over the years in the attic of the field house. And it's fine and it has served its purpose, but Joe pointed out to us that it really can get really hot up there in an attic, and there's a lot of equipment now. So we're working through some ideas to kind of create it as more of a compartmentalized area that we'll be able to bring in some heating and cooling and get that under control. So we've been working through that, and more to come on there. And one last good project that, again, is under the elementary school small capital projects item is we're adding exit signage and emergency lights to the Clark. So if you've seen in some of our elementary schools, we have exit signs that are made of heavy-duty paper that were meant to glow at night. And I've never seen one actually glow. So we're going to go to real electric and light bulbs.
Oh my God.
So that's a good project. We have an electrician sort of lined up for that. So some of these are in different phases. Some are contracted, some are ongoing, some are coming up, and we'll be working through them over the course of the fall and the school year. But I just wanted to give a quick update as to them and answer any questions if you have.
Well, I assure you, it's a much more thorough and detailed report than I used to get. So, thank you.
No problem.
So I want to say, first of all, thank you. And I'm disappointed at how excited I am about these kinds of improvements. And I really look forward to the day when this is just a nod that this is normal as opposed to really a big deal. You know, with all due respect to the people who've been doing this work in bits and pieces in the past, that, you know, because we didn't have this kind of a recap. I know that there are things that have been done in the past, but clearly there are many things that have never been done. So thank you for that. I would say, when I saw those pictures that you posted of the field house and of Clark, I had like a real sense of pride. And I think that the perception is that everything is just a big dump. So to be able to share this information, I would love to see, you know, the select board hear some of this. I know town meeting would be interested in some of this information. And I was just looking online here, and I see that we have 15 people who are participants in this, and the majority of them are in this room. So, you know, perhaps if there's a way that we can figure out to get some of this information out, I think people would be genuinely interested.
Well, my superintendent's report goes on the blog and
Okay.
gets tweeted out, and all of these items are linked, so everyone has access to it, but maybe I could highlight, check out the summer facilities work going on and the capital projects and capital improvements. I can certainly do that and highlight it.
Yeah, I would think especially the Capital Improvements Committee would feel pretty good about seeing some of these things, and, you know, seeing those pictures is like, oh, wow, this is nice.
Sure. I don't want to date myself, but yes, the signs at Clark used to glow.
And Amy, you read my mind. I was going to say the exact same thing about, this is a good news story.
Yeah.
And you're right, we shouldn't get this excited over this, but thank you, Max, for this report. And, but I think this, you know, I think people in town will really appreciate this, and getting it out there is, you know, like I said, a good news story.
So we won't be this happy next summer, but.
That's okay.
But this was really great. Thank you.
No problem, happy to do it.
And the final item, last but certainly not least, is from the technology department in combination with our director of finance. We have talked about the responsibility of the committee to designate items as surplus. This is separated from other surplus that Ms. Seibert might declare because it is all technology related. Shout out to Kerry O'Donnell and to Ms. Mackie Knowles and the entire tech department for the yeoman's work they've done with moving, buying back, replacing, declaring surplus. And you can open the spreadsheet, and there's lots of tabs at the bottom, but I'd like to turn it over to our technology gurus up there to explain what occurred and what they did.
Hi, thank you. I'm LaTanya, the tech director. I have with me Kerry, our digital learning integration specialist, and basically my backup dancer for everything. So over the years, I've come to school committee and they've said, seems like you need help. So I finally was able to get help, and we got Kerry, and that's why this project even happened. For the past 5 years, I've been finding random old equipment in closets throughout all the schools. Some of the stuff dates back to the 80s and 90s, which means we're going to have an amazing legacy of technology display at the library because we found some gems. But aside from things that, you know, work with Ataris, we had lots of outdated computer parts, monitors, and keyboards, and they had zero value. But Kerry worked so hard since maybe December, and she worked with 4 different companies to find value in even like a Chromebook from the original Chromebook line for even if it was $10. And so we had a company that came and evaluated everything, and there were 12 pallets, 9? 12 pallets of technology items, all shrink wrapped, that we found the best value for. We worked with Martha Seibert to make sure that we could see what we could do here, and it had to be recycled responsibly. And that's the reason why it's been hiding in closets, is no one knew what to do with it. So we found a company that we loved, Second Life Mac, and they just said, you know, once they get all the equipment, then they go through and evaluate for value. But we could see anywhere between, and the check goes directly to Apple so we can get some more some things for our school. So we're looking at hopefully getting enough money to replace our library desktops with some nice Mac desktops to run their inventory and to work seamlessly with the teacher computers, and to supplement some of our laptop inventory. So I think it was about 1,300 items that we found that we were able to get rid of, but they're surplus, so they didn't have value, or they had very little value, and we worked really hard to get as much value as we could. So we don't know. We could get a check for $7,000 at Apple or store credit, or it could be like 20. So it all depends on the quality of what we gave them, so they're going to evaluate. But we are excited to get something. So that was the surplus, and it was a ton of work because we had all the tech kids, Vlad, Steven, everybody climbing through closets, the ones that the HVAC was dying in, they're 90 degrees, and just pulling out all these old things. So finally we'll have space, storage, and hopefully start to replenish. And now we're on a really great replacement cycle that will come in an upcoming meeting with, like, we have everything that we have at Swampscott Public Schools is actually in an asset managed inventory. If you look at that spreadsheet, you'll see like things didn't have numbers, tags, nobody knew where they came from. So, you know, it's been a 5-year road, and finally with the assistance of Carrie being here, we were able to get that stuff out. So.
More good news. And so, formally, Ms. Seibert, we need a vote to declare it's right. Declare.
As with everything, anything you buy with tax dollars, there's a process for procuring it, and anything you're disposing of that you bought with tax dollars, there's a process to dispose of it. So this checks that box in terms of.
And it doesn't matter what the value is?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I gave it to Max.
It doesn't matter what the value is? We just vote to dispose of it?
These we're going to vote to dispose of because we've determined internally that there's a de minimis value to it. So basically that's Latin for no value. And that's why.
No value items, but how about the ones that maybe will go to Apple credit?
So I think you're focusing on the tabs, and LaTanya, correct me if I'm wrong, the surplus of no value and the itemized list of non-value, correct?
So there is an itemized list of the things that they took that they said we will get money for.
Okay, so then it's the third tab of surplus no value only. The
So what you have 2 itemized lists and 2 pivot tables, basically. So you can look at every single serial number on one sheet, and so there's only 2 lists of items.
I see.
Each one has a table attached to it, so you didn't have to hand count things. So that's it. It's you know, we still, again, we don't know the value, but we did talk to other schools, and Martha and I talked a lot about the different processes that they had in different towns, and the step was to get it declared a surplus. And you know, with all the things going on with COVID and stuff, we are a little late to these meetings, but we didn't want to push it off any longer. And we started this process in December and finally had numbers and felt we were in a good place last week. And then the company just, you know, randomly FedEx showed up and was like, we're here.
So we need to, is it the 345 pieces that we need to decommission or deem surplus?
It's really, we need to deem all of it surplus. It is in 2 different categories, one that has no value and one that has value. The one that has value, we've gone through different vendors and determined that this vendor is going to give us the most optimum pricing for it.
Okay.
And that's how this vendor was selected.
So the motion
it's
is.
one motion.
So it's one motion to declare all of it surplus.
So 971. Yeah, I'm just trying to like do some numbers so that I can get a motion. So there's 1,416 pieces. So I will entertain a motion to declare these 1,416 pieces of technology. How do I move this? Of technology
As surplus.
Surplus from. Let me see. I just totally lost my train of thought. I will.
I think you could put a period there, as surplus.
Yeah.
Say that again.
You, if
That was a sentence.
As surplus, that's it.
As surplus?
as
Surplus.
surplus,
Oh,
you
as
did it. You can
surplus.
just
Okay.
end it
And you
there.
said it, yeah.
Sorry, I heard as surplus. Sorry. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to declare 1,416 pieces of technology as surplus.
There you go.
So moved.
Second?
Fabulous. Any questions?
The only question I have is, what's the oldest piece that you found?
I think we have an original Mac monitor, so we have some things that we think have value that you can't put a price on it because of history. So our senior tech ninja, Bradley, who's leaving for college next week, has been putting together a little exhibit with Apple through the years, all the cell phones through the years, things like that. So anything he's been finding. So it's pretty cool.
Cell phones are probably the best.
Yeah, we have models of like each, the big one.
Zach Morris.
Oh, that's great.
It's gonna be in the Innovation Center, right?
Yeah, so the other little piece of this is that all that equipment was in the Innovation Center, which that's another upcoming presentation, but all the like new furniture from Capitol and all the redesign and things are happening. So we had to be like, we need to move this out. There's no place for all this stuff. So this was the part one we wanted to get done before school started, so I'm really excited.
But I have to confess, as a minimalist, I walked in there today after visiting with the new teachers, and I was a little bit overwhelmed, and Steven Silbert was in there and said, oh no, they took the 12 pallets out already. And I'm like, I can't take this.
Yeah, there's still a lot in there.
There is a lot in there, but most of it's good inventory that we're actually
gonna be distributed.
We're distributing, like Max said. The busiest time for facilities and tech is.
But I was a little overwhelmed, I have to admit. And Steven's like, yeah.
I want to see the museum when it's.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we'll do a tour one night.
Yes.
School
If you have hoarder mentality, I'll send you what the library looked like in a video before the pallets were picked up.
Yes. I would love to see it, yes.
Okay,
And
so.
2 hours later, that concludes my superintendent's
No,
report.
not yet, because I have to take the vote.
Oh.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Those are surplus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, lots of great things happening.
Okay, it is 9 o'clock. Okay. With that, Ms. Seibert, I am going to turn this over to you, our Director of Finance.
Why do I always come up 2 hours into the meeting? Do you want to allow me to share my screen?
Yeah.
That way I can just,
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Glenn, since you're the host now, you have to do that. That was exciting.
Good stuff.
still.
That's what my text was about the other day, like,
yeah, good thing.
Still says that I'm disabled.
Yeah, they're just working through this. Teaching.
She should be able to share her screen.
Ralph, you should be able to share your
Oh, there we go. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Share that. There we go. Okay. So thank you for this opportunity to give you an update on our FY21 budget. We did, I'm going to have a summary by cost center. We did spend 99.98% of our general fund appropriation, which equated to $26,627,764. We'll end the year with a modest surplus. Right now, it's $4,490. And I will be requesting school committee to vote to move money between cost centers and to vote their acknowledgement of a few things procedurally that I had to do that I'll get into in the presentation. So at this point in time, we have posted all the journal entries to accrue summer payrolls. Our last summer payroll is Friday, which now opens the window that we can onboard and do all the maintenance that we have to do to our accounting, our HR modules for our September 10th payroll, which is our first payroll of the fiscal year for our new teachers for the new fiscal school year. I want to point out to the committee that we did utilize funds again this year to prepay tuition. $211,175 was used to prepay tuition for FY22. It's one of the few things under Mass General Law that we are allowed to prepay. And so we did utilize that. Last year, just to put it in perspective, last year we were able to prepay $87,000 of tuition, and this year obviously it was a significant amount more. The auditors come in, I believe they're coming in next week. I've been in close contact with the town accountant. I know that I have another week to get in any more journal entries to move things around before the auditors come. Just to, again, because I'm a numbers person and I know some of you, I appreciate data the way I do. the school department does utilize a PO system, and we do require people to enter a requisition and get a purchase order for all purchases. And so this year, we issued 1,040 purchase orders for $8.8 million. And as of June 30th, only 78 of those were still open for $460,000. Of those 78 that were still open, a number of them were for prepaid tuition, so 211,000 of that 460 that was open at June 30th was the tuition ones that I opened at the end of the year. We do this every year. We open POs for what we call late bills. I open a PO for special education late bills, for general education and office type of late bills, and then also for facilities late bills. And while we do a great job of managing our purchases through the PO system, every once in a while, someone buys something without a PO. And without that late PO, I would have no mechanism to pay that bill except to go to town meeting and say, will you approve paying a prior year bill? So that's why we do that. And that's a very similar practice that's done in other communities. And I know the town has their own late bills on their, late POs on their side too. There were $97,000, almost $100,000 worth of open POs for ongoing facilities. And included in that were an open PO for the June electric bills that didn't come in time to get paid before we closed the fiscal year. I did open a PO for a very modest amount, $10,000 for unemployment claims. We do still have a few trickling in that refer to the prior year, but that pretty much has stopped at this point, so that's good. And then some just other general encumbrances. As part of the close process every single year, we do review all of the POs that we've carried forward from prior years. And so I do want the committee to know that as part of our look-back process, we closed 27 POs from FY19 and more than 100 POs for FY20. And this is really, I feel badly about this, that we held that money for a year. But last year, you have to remember that it was, very much in the midst of a pandemic where a lot of our administrative assistant staff in the schools were still working remotely for most of the year from March to June, and we're only starting to come back in June. So out of an abundance of caution, we kept a lot of POs open last year. That's not our normal practice. So we did return $107,000 to free cash as a result of closing these POs.
To the town free cash?
Yes.
Oh,
yes. So I wanted to give an update on by cost center, and so the first cost center is the administrative cost center, and this one, sorry, I just want to get to my notes from here. Excuse me. Sorry. The administrative cost center is under budget by $22,000. And this is really a function of some savings in the material line, the supplies and material line. But I want to speak about other expenses, because that's the line that captures the expense for our food service program. And I really have to give great compliments to our food service partner, Chartwells, and our Director of Food Services, Maureen Kellett, who did an outstanding job mitigating the program losses this year, and they were significant. We lost about $75, almost $80,000 this year in our food service program. And just to give you some idea on the numbers, the last normal year that we had, we served 119,000 meals in that fiscal 19, so which was the last pre-pandemic normal year. From 19 to 20, we lost 27%. So we served 86,000 meals in FY20. And then in FY21, we served 79,725 meals. So FY20, we lost the last 3 months of that year. It was not as bad because we partnered with the senior center, and we picked up a lot of meals, helping this, God bless you, a lot of meal service with partnering with the senior center. So that helped mitigate some of our losses, or that helped stop having any losses in FY20. I should rephrase that. We didn't have losses in FY20, but in FY21, operating under the hybrid half in, half out, no school on Wednesday for a lot of the kids for most of the year, really negatively impacted our program. The other thing is Chartwell's makes a lot of their money on, we call it the power of the cookie.
Yeah.
They make their money on the other things, the accoutrements that they're able to sell, not necessarily just the meal. And we've been very limited in what we were able to sell. I've said it to Dennis at the high school, the principal at the high school, having open campus at the high school has impacted our food service program because when you have a captive audience, they're more apt to buy a slice of pizza or something else from food service, but having an open campus impacted our food service program. So one of the things that we've had to do this year, because we are a national school lunch program, we cannot operate at a loss. And so the operating budget has to subsidize the food service program. This was done through the mechanics of a journal entry. What I did is I took expenses that were charged to food service and moved them to the operating budget. So I moved $85,502 of expenses from the revolving fund to the operating budget. And that is something that I will have the school committee vote on, simply because that was a budget item. The revolving fund was approved, and the budget didn't have that in it, and it is a large amount of money.
Where's that money on this?
It's baked into the other expense line.
Okay.
So you can see that it's over budget by $20,000. That $85,000 is baked into there. Moving on to general education. I just talked a lot about the food service budget. I didn't have this slide up, but I am recommending that you approve that $85,502 transfer of that journal entry.
Do you want to do all of these at the end? Or
I am, yeah.
Okay.
I have a slide at the very end.
Okay.
Thank you. So for general education, this one, it's favorable budget by $328,000 if you're just looking at the bottom, but there's so much going on in those individual lines. We had professional salaries did finish over budget by $21,000. Over the course of the year, we experienced salary savings from open positions of about $97,000. We had some mid-year turnover savings of almost $50,000, and unbudgeted support from the METCO grant of $121,000. And that unbudgeted support was the transportation savings on the METCO grant. We did not run a bus for most of the year. We ran with one bus until we came back in person, full in person at the end of the year. When we did go back to 2 buses, we didn't run late buses. So that $121,000 of savings, we amended the grant and used that to help offset teacher salaries in the general education line. Those savings that I just identified, the $97,000, the $48,000, the $121,000, those were offset by over expenditures. So they were offset by increased FTE, covering additional sections at the high school, providing classroom coverage at the elementary. We hired additional 1.0 to cover leaves at the elementary level, and we covered 9 LOAs over the course of the year. So, and these leaves were paid leaves. So we were incurring the cost of paying the employee, and then also the cost of hiring the replacement. So those were all softened or offset each other. So the bottom line is we were over budget by $21,000. The clerical savings, that's the result of turnover. We did have turnover in a couple positions at the elementary level. We are fully staffed as of this time. The other salary savings, that one jumps off the page at $260,000. That is a result of substitute savings of $174,000, which accounts for 67% of that, and then some vacant positions and stipends accounted for the balance of that. Supplies and materials, no surprise there. That is under budget by $188,000. That's really a function of the schedule that we operated this year, being hybrid and remote for part of the year, really cut down on buying consumables for the most part. Excuse me, and then other expenses. I want to talk about this one a little bit. That $114,000, when I presented the budget for the FY22 budget, we talked in great length about how we were going to utilize the ESSER 2 funds. And one of the things we were going to use the ESSER 2 funds was to fund technology. And as we came into the end of the year and I saw what we had for a budget surplus, it was an opportunity to use the operating budget to pay for that technology and save the ESSER 2 funds for a future year. And so that's what we did. We leveraged the FY21 operating budget to fund the Apple purchases, and we allowed that freed up money in ESSER 2 to help fund the summer program, the summer learning program that just happened. In special education, professional salaries was under budget by $30,000. That really was a savings from some vacant positions that were offset by some reductions in our non-resident tuition. So we had budgeted our non-resident special education tuition. That's the tuition that we charge to other districts that send children here to participate in our in-district programs. We had budgeted $200,000 for that, and that was that came in actually $48,000 less than that. It came in just under $100 or just over $150,000. And if you want to recall, our FY22 budget carried $150,000 of revenue because we recognized that $200,000 was not accurate, a non-accurate number for FY22. The other salary savings of $171,000 was really the result of some open positions for ESPs. It was $30,000 for ESPs and $118,000 for tutors and some unpaid leaves. So and I think we can comment on this more. We've had a really difficult time hiring. Like, a lot of people are not working. We have some open. We're starting this school year right now with some open positions, and we really encountered that a lot during the pandemic last year, where people were cautious, didn't want to necessarily come in, and these positions are not the teaching positions. They're tutor positions that range from $22 to $25 an hour. So some people were electing to not come back into the workforce. I did a separate chart for contracted services just because there was so much going on in that one that I wanted to really delineate it between the actual categories in there. So our legal was under budget by $16,000. Our professional development was under budget by $4,000. Our purchase services was over budget by $185,000. And purchase services is where we capture the expense for our consulting with psychology. I'm trying to think of all the services that are in there. Our OT, our PT, our outside psych services are captured in there. I think that's the bulk of it. I'm trying to think if there was really anything else in there. Our membership in our collaboratives is in there, but that didn't force us to be over budget. We had budgeted for that. So that's really where we didn't have staff and where we had salary savings. Some of these things were required services, and we had to backfill using contracted services rather than an employee. And that's where you're seeing, so some of those salary savings that you saw elsewhere are offset here. And then the largest savings was in transportation at $459,000. When we started the year, our NRT, our partner with transportation, when we started remote, they charged us 50% of the contracted value. And then once we started in person, even though it was a hybrid model, they shifted to full day. Obviously, we paid full rate for a day that we were in session, but when we weren't in session, we paid, I believe it was either 72 or 74% of what the contracted rate was, because at that point, they had to maintain their staff. They couldn't say, well, I'm going to pay my staff for 4 days and not for the 5th day. So, and it was very agreeable, and so that's where we ended up with that. And then tuition, you can see tuition is significantly over, but part of the driver of that is I prepaid $211,000 of tuition. So you can see that reflected there as well. And here I just wanted to give a little more depth and breadth to tuition. So one of the other things that we were able to do was to soften our offset for circuit breaker. So we have multiple funding sources for out-of-district tuition. We utilize our IDEA grant and we utilize circuit breaker. And so in total, you can see our tuition line was going from $2.9 million to $3.2 million, $162,000 still in encumbrances, and then over budget by the $671,000. What we did by softening the circuit breaker usage is next year's budget rather than use, well, in this year's budget, rather than using the $992,000 that we had budgeted to use from circuit breaker, we used $824,000. And what this does is this gives us budget certainty for next year. So we're carrying forward our full award for this year into next year, or $1,010,000, and that's really helpful. That's where we want to be. We were there, and we want to maintain that. We didn't want to keep eating into that. So some of the savings that we accumulated in our general ed, we were able to really set the table very nicely for special education for next year.
That's great. Excuse me. That's fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
Know a little bit about that. It's really smart on your part to do that.
Thank you. So on facility side, this one, the other salaries was overspent by $25,000. This was really driven by Saturday cleaning, which I feel like that is a blessing that number is that low. Our facilities department did a fantastic job coming in on Saturdays in every single building, working, an extra shift almost every single weekend from the time we started until really April or May. Supplies and materials underspent. That's really a result of the consumables. When we don't have kids in the building using paper towels and toilet paper and other consumables, it kind of helped mitigate some of those expenses. The other expense line, I want to talk about that one a little bit. That one is over budget by $210,000. That's really a combination of a lot of things. So part of what's driving that is $145,000 of offset from our revolving funds that didn't happen. We didn't have an offset for extended day because we didn't run a program. We didn't have an offset from rental facilities income because we didn't allow anyone to rent our buildings. Mm-hmm. So part of what drove that $210,000 budget deficit was there were supposed to be offsets from revenue sources that didn't happen. The other driver of that actually went the other way, which surprised me, was there was some utility savings. So from what we budgeted to what we actually spent, it was $27,000 for utility savings, and those were offset by some COVID expenses. So some of the things for COVID I kept on the budget. I didn't charge to some of our federal grants because we had room in the budget. So we saved those federal grants for other things and other purposes. And we continue to wait final guidance on FEMA. I spoke with my counterpart from Wellesley yesterday, and she was very excited because she was getting almost $350,000 back from FEMA for testing that they did in their district that we didn't do. And they did some very unique testing in Wellesley, a lot of pool testing and whatnot. Most of what I'm hearing from my counterparts is FEMA is not giving reimbursement for the things that we spent the money on that's here in the operating budget, like the PPE, the cleaning, like where they've said that they might. So Amy Saro, the town accountant, and I continue to monitor what FEMA will and will not reimburse for. The good news with this is by keeping it on the operating budget, if FEMA does decide to reimburse for some of these things and we can't submit a claim, that money will come back to the town and go to free cash. If we kept it on our ESSER grants or our COVID grants or our CARE grants, those have a timeline on when they're no longer usable. And so what we didn't, Amy and I talked about this at great length, because what we didn't want to have happen was what happened with the CARES money last year, where they told us, spend it by December 30th, spend it by December 30th, spend it by December 30th, and then on December 22nd said, oh, you have until next year to spend it. And so we feel the same way with this FEMA reimbursement. We'd rather keep it where it is, and if it gets reimbursed, great, it's money back to free cash for the town, versus using our grant for it. So the grants are really being used for things that we know are not reimbursable. They stay where the grant is, and we'll be fine with that. So kind of how we've been trying to approach it. So the school, this just kind of went through what some of those other expenses were that were COVID related, that we know that FEMA is not going to reimburse for: desks, chairs, seating, janitorial supplies, air purifiers, the cough box partitions that we purchased. So these are all things that we kept on the operating budget rather than trying to find a federal source of funding for. And then really just kind of showing the lost revenue for offsets was $145,000.
Do we wind up running into trouble, though, if we keep them in the
on the books the way they are, that it sort of artificially inflates next year as we go to budget, or deflates it?
No, that's a good question, and I appreciate that. I don't think so, because I really, without really doing zero-based budgeting, I do kind of do zero-based budgeting, so I always look at what the budget was last year, but if there wasn't a need for it, it probably would get reallocated somewhere else. And I know that we, Max Casper and I and Amy Sorrow and the tri-chairs, we were talking about what we're going to do with facilities and the approach for budgeting for facilities, not just for the school, but for the town. So I think that there's some desire to continue those conversations on whether it belongs embedded in the school department budget or whether it should be its own standalone department budget. And that really speaks to, well, then we wouldn't be reallocating those resources back to something else. They would be sacred and in their own budget. So,
Thanks.
And then the last cost center is the district-wide, which was under budget by $28,000. This was really driven, the large line there, the other salaries, you can see was under budget by $113,000. That really was driven by salary savings in the crossing guards, 'cause we capture crossing guards in the district-wide, and working a 4-day schedule, and having remote days and starting the school year remotely, really, I don't want to say negative or favorably, impacted that budget line, because I think, it negatively impacted the crossing guards because they were only paid for the days that they worked, but it was a savings overall for the budget. So tonight, we're requesting the committee really help realign the budgets so that they are in a positive way at the end of the year. And then also requesting the approval of kind of the transfer, how I reused some of the funds, the $85,000 for food services, and then just really making sure that the committee was aware of what I did with the ESSER 2 grant, supplementing using the operating budget rather than the ESSER 2. And then lastly, the change to circuit breaker, the reduction to the use of circuit breaker funds. And I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have. I know it's a lot of numbers to take in at this hour, but hopefully it was cohesive and understandable.
Anyone?
And this is really just my lack of understanding. On the circuit breaker side, so the FY21 budget was, let's call it $1 million, just for argument's sake. We're reducing that by $168K for the new budget of $825. So the monies we receive back from the Commonwealth for the circuit breaker, does that affect any of these numbers?
No, it doesn't. So what we're going to get is what we're going to get.
Okay.
How we spend it is at our discretion. And then the reason, and I appreciate the question so much, because the reason I put it out here is to be transparent. When you approve the budget and you say you're supposed to use this much as an offset from revolving fund or from circuit breaker or from a grant, if I'm going to deviate from that, I feel like it's my obligation to let you guys know that that was a change in plan. So we had balanced the budget, the FY21 budget was balanced by using more circuit breaker.
Great.
And so this eliminates that. This puts it back to that $824,000. That was last year's award amount. And so now we're able to carry forward the entirety of the FY22 award amount, which is $1,010,000.
In other words, we planned to dip into it and we didn't have to.
Yes, and we didn't have to. Because we saved money on transportation, on so many other things that and with consultation of the superintendent, this wasn't, I didn't just do this on my own, but with consultation of the superintendent.
And then we didn't have to.
Yeah.
Right, that was basically my question was, are we using, I want to make sure that the money money that was allocated to us was used. Don't want to get into the situation that some, like some state and federal programs, you don't use it 1 year, they'll reduce it the next year. That was my only question, but thank you.
So is anyone, other questions from the committee?
No, it's clear.
As usual, you're incredibly thorough.
Thank you.
And very detailed, and your explanations are fabulous. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
And I find that because you keep us up to date periodically, that there's no surprise. So, much appreciative. I think more.
These are all unbudgeted or unaudited numbers, so I don't expect a major deviation to any of these. You know, things that we're finding right now are small, like what I would call ankle biters, where, we missed, accruing for someone's, worked 2 hours and we missed accruing for $50 or something like that. So there really shouldn't be a significant change.
I do have a question about the grant money, the ESSER funds and sort of putting, saving it for later. Is there any chance that we wind up with too much put away?
No, and I appreciate the question. The superintendent, myself, the director of teaching and learning, and the assistant superintendent, Martha Raymond, we met, we've been meeting ongoing, but we really had kind of an ESSER summit where we looked at, okay, here's ESSER 1, here's how much we have left, what do we want to use it for? ESSER 2, this is what I was able to do with the budget, this was supposed to have been approved back on August 4th, but it got delayed. Yeah. And it helped inform how we budgeted and planned for ESSER 3. So ESSER 1, we were able to amend the grant and use the last $49,000 of it to help fund the summer learning program. And simultaneously, the director of teaching and learning had applied for a $50,000 summer learning grant and got it. So that's funding $50,000 of it. So we were able to take $100,000 out of what we had thought we were going to have to spend ESSER 2 on, and now we have it to use on something else. So it's really just trying to optimize the timing of when we use things. But I think that we have a good plan, and we're nimble and we're able to adapt and change. So
Do we have what we need in our buildings, like ventilations and PPEs and everything else that we're gonna need going into the school year that we thought maybe we weren't gonna need 2 months ago?
No, and I appreciate that. We had, we developed a PPE inventory spreadsheet that we were maintaining. We're starting the year with over 6,000 masks. We did just order some child-sized masks, so we still had an inventory from last year. I still have disposable gowns that we received from Chief Archer that he received from FEMA, so I still have almost 400 of those in my office. So I feel like we're starting the year in a good position in terms of PPE, and we did put $10,000 line into our ESSER 3 funds for PPE. So I don't envision funding PPE from the operating budget.
But how about the ventilation?
Yeah, like the
extra air purifiers.
Not only are the air purifiers staying in all of the spaces, the filters are being changed as well. The Max Casper is all over that with the facilities. They're in every space that they've been in. We haven't removed them from.
How about the cafeterias? Like where the kids are? How about the cafeterias where we're going to have unmasked? How we're going to have unmasked and we're going to have more crowded spaces?
Some schools are not using their cafeterias, so we can certainly go through the other cafeteria spaces and take inventory of what we might need. But I was pleased that, of course, the director of facilities was ahead of the game in terms of filter changes.
And I think the goal is to try to have outdoor lunch as much as possible.
It is, but
yeah, but I'm just saying. I mean, there's just that. I mean, we're putting kids in those spaces and. Just want to make sure that
we're doing more than just the bare minimum.
That we need to do, more than.
Mm-hmm. You can do that. Okay, so we're looking for motion.
For a motion, yeah. And I kind of segmented it into three different motions, if you want.
Okay. So do you want us to? Should we go line by line for the, how?
I think probably my recommendation would be to do one motion to reallocate funds between cost centers and just state what the new revised budget is for each cost center.
I confess, I'm feeling completely
tired.
I know this is hard. These are always hard motions.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I'm feeling kind of blank in terms of formulating what this motion should be.
I would, a motion to reallocate funds between cost center, reallocate FY21 funds between cost centers, adjusting the administrative cost center to a revised budget of $1,314,402, general education to a revised budget of $13,956,761, special education to a revised budget of $9,359,501, school facilities to a revised budget of $2,417,042, and district-wide programs to a revised budget of $1,584,548.
In order to keep the budget balanced.
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion passes unanimously, or vote passes unanimously?
The next one would be a budget acknowledging the use of funds for the food service revolving fund of $85,502 and the change in funding source from ESSER 2 to the operating budget for $144,815.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Glenn?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you, and I'm aye, okay.
Can I ask just one quick question?
Sure.
Still, this was something we're doing to acknowledge that you did this, not because.
So the FY22 budget that this committee voted and approved had me specifically using this money in a different way. And so I really wanted the committee to acknowledge and vote that they are aware that we've changed how we were appropriating the funds.
We did this last year, too, I remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to redo that. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, aye.
All opposed? None? The motion passes for the...
And then the last one is just acknowledging the revised budget for circuit breaker offset to be $824,952.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make it.
Second? Anybody?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I am an aye. Motion passes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a lot.
Okay, with apologies to Dr. Bacon, we are not going to do the Director of Teaching and Learning update tonight, as it was 2.5 hours. I didn't think it was fair for her to stay on the phone. So apologies, Dr. Bacon.
Jean Bacon's hand is up.
Oh, wait, I thought she left. I don't have control of this. Can somebody let Dr. Bacon speak?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Perfect, thank you. Sorry about that, Dr. Bacon.
That's okay, I've been here. Yeah, I just wasn't a panelist tonight for some reason. If I could request that we just do the vote on the accounting textbook, so we can get that order process, would that be possible?
I completely defer to you, and as I said, I apologize to make you hang around unnecessarily.
No, that's okay. Is that okay if we just do that?
Yes.
Okay. So we would like the school committee's permission to purchase a new accounting textbook. It's a course that's taught at the high school. The usual enrollment is around 25 students. The current textbook is from 2004. And again, we've been doing inventories. All our textbooks are starting to replace things that are very old. The first one, the teacher, Sue Comparato, has suggested is really outdated in terms of the examples it uses and not very culturally representative of a diverse set of scenarios and people that are occurring in the textbook. So she investigated 3 new textbooks. There's apparently a very limited selection of accounting textbooks that are written for a high school market. So she investigated 3 textbooks, and she consulted with her professional learning network of other schools that offer high school accounting. And she also discussed the textbook that she was leaning toward with 2 other faculty members, Lisa Green from the history department and Peter Franklin from the English department, to get their input on the textbook. And she would like to purchase a textbook called Century 21 Accounting from Signage. It's the 11th edition. It was published in 2019. It also has an online component that she says other colleagues of her rave about in terms of its usefulness with the students, and the kinds of scenarios it presents are very engaging for them. And that comes at we're buying a 1-year subscription with the actual physical textbooks, and then we can renew those annual subscriptions, which are about $30 a student per year. So we are requesting your approval to make this textbook purchase.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the purchase of the, did I have it, Century 21?
Accounting, yes.
Accounting textbook. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Dr. Bacon, it's approved.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for hanging on. Okay. Just make sure that's muted. Okay, so so we don't need to update the policies on masks. And what about the concussion policy and protocol update? Is that?
I mean, that's just a routine.
So if it's routine,
It's routine, so we can.
So I'm gonna recommend then that we table that since it's 9:30.
Yeah, I mean.
There's not substantive changes, so it can be tabled.
Does that work for you as well?
Does the athletic director need to weigh in on this, or?
I can request her presence, yeah.
I'm just wondering, I mean, usually she says something.
Sure.
John is the other member of the policy.
So by tabling it, what are we doing then?
We're putting it off for
To the
next meeting.
Okay, yeah.
Just in the interest of time and since there aren't substantive changes. All right, and with that, I'm going to move to the consent agenda. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tonight we have 5 items. We have our regular session minutes from August 4th. We have our minutes from the public forum on August 18th. We have a donation from the estate of Frank DeFelice, which is going to the varsity football and baseball program. And we have a donation from the Beckham Ash Foundation to the Swampscott High School DLC, which stands for
Discovery Learning Center.
the Discovery Learning Center. Thank you, Superintendent. Can I entertain a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Can I have a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion approves unanimously. And I see one member here in our audience. Would you like to speak?
I would, and thank you for hearing me. I know it's been a long night. If I was teaching, I'd tell everyone to get up and dance around for a minute. It's flowing.
So if you could just introduce yourself, I know that we know
Thank
who
you.
you
My
are.
name's Amanda Kashuba. I think this is on. I just wanted to pass. Would you mind passing that down?
And if we could just limit it to 3 minutes,
Yes, I
please.
will be as possible. What I'm passing out, I wanted to thank you all. We're faced with a very difficult job. I appreciated your comments in the beginning. Grateful to be part of Swampscott School District. You've made my family and I feel like an individual versus just a number, and I appreciate that. I'm passing this out for you to look in detail, but it's apparent that medical interventions, masks, will not be for parents a choice to make, or even schools for that matter. So I am sending you something. It's one of many things I've seen in consideration of the protocols that you're putting together for the masks. You can see, I can help you repeat this study if you want, how much microbial growth happens on masks. So
We need to look at budgeting for, do we need to encourage kids to change them more? Do we need UV treatment of masks? Do we need something to manage this to make it healthier for our kids? So that's my first point. The second was that there's a lot of discussion around the vaccine last week, but no mention of how the curriculum could be improved to look at a number of things. Whether a person gets sick or not has a lot to do with their susceptibility. Okay, so we need to look at the school lunches, improving quality, teachers talking about nutrition, clean living, exercise, proper sleep, hydration, stress relief, all of these things. I'd be grateful to assist with this because I think, and all of these things also impact mental health, which we're putting funds to, which is fantastic. Couple quick questions. Medical interventions is a test you're talking about introducing, and they don't belong in schools. I think if a student chooses not to, they can't participate in sports and English, that's medical discrimination, so I'm asking you to consider HIPAA laws around this. You know, at this moment, this is not legal. I know they are trying to pass laws right now that are getting held up. It's in the works. Anyway, I'd like to see very specific information. Amanda, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to see how they're determining that these tests are accurate. Because are we opening a can of worms if you start testing people? 100% accuracy, I don't buy that. So where's the data to show the accuracy of these tests? And the last thing I want to bring up quickly is I think it's dangerous to put politics and fear into decision-making when it comes to the health of our children. I wanted to read something from District 49 in Colorado Springs, Colorado. They are from an area that is about the same population when we're talking about the county. And I think it's good to look state to state. What are people doing other places? Because then the politics kind of gets, you know, it gets different and all over the place. And I think it's very important to look at even across the country. This is what they released last week. Despite, I'm like rushing, so I'm like shaky. Despite aggressive masking, tracing, and quarantine protocols, our community still endured multiple waves of variants and transmission, including widespread displacement into online learning. Ultimately, not a single child in our district died from COVID, and very few required hospitalization, fewer than in a typical flu season. Meanwhile, our larger community lost 15 youth to suicide, and the Colorado Children's Hospital issued a state of emergency for youth mental health, declaring in May that we are seeing our pediatric emergency departments and our inpatient units overrun with kids attempting suicide and suffering from other forms of major mental health illness. We now have 18 months of direct experience with the actual impacts of transmission, infection, and quarantine. It is our judgment, backed by months of students and community observation and interaction with corresponding experimental data, that the risks of quarantine far outweigh the risks of disease. That is why we will not facilitate voluntary reporting and contact tracing that are designed to direct healthy individuals into quarantine and isolation. We trust those individuals to make decisions that match their values and level of sensitivity. For some in our community, the current level of exposure justifies wearing masks in public. By direct observation, we can confirm that for the overwhelming majority of parents, students, and staff in District 49, current transmission levels and exposure potential do not justify universal masking. Far from ignoring science or safety, we have determined that overreacting to the possibility of transmission has been bad for learning, bad for mental health, and ultimately far worse for our students than the low-level medical risk of a virus that rarely causes any significant issues for children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, it is 9:46. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, roll call?
Suzanne, aye.
Karen, aye.
John, aye.
Amy, aye. That is unanimous. We are all adjourned. Thank you.